Chapter 1. The Body. Kade opened his eyes on the morning of the second day before the Imperial Cultivation Tournament. The body's name was, by the body's own 17 years of memory, Kade Vorin. The body was 19. The body's bloodline was the third branch of the Vorin clan, a minor noble cultivation house from the eastern province. The body was, by the cultivation ranking the clan had assigned it at 15, mid-bronze tier, the lowest tier the clan permitted its registered representatives to compete at. The body had been selected to represent the Vorin clan at the upcoming tournament because the clan needed a registered representative and the body was the cheapest noble son the clan could afford to lose. The body was scheduled to die in the second round. The kill would come from the protagonist of a novel Kade had read in his old life. The protagonist's name was Han Rui. The protagonist was, at the present moment, an 18-year-old outer disciple of the Iron Pine sect who had, by the novel's quiet design, been training for the past 3 years under a hidden cultivation manual he had inherited from his dead grandfather. The protagonist would, in the tournament's second round, awaken his bloodline's signature technique for the first time. The awakening would, by the novel's design, occur in response to the body's specific cruelty during the second round fight. The protagonist would kill the body with the awaken technique. The killing would make the protagonist famous. The fame would launch the protagonist's 300-chapter rise to continental dominance. Kade had been in the body for approximately 11 seconds. He sat up. The bedroom was a small private chamber at the Vorin clan's tournament lodge. The lodge was in the Imperial City, 3 blocks from the tournament's central arena. The chamber had a single bed, a small desk, a wooden wardrobe, and a window that looked out on the lodge's small interior courtyard. The clan's representative party had arrived in the city the previous evening. Kade had, in the 11 seconds of his arrival, also inherited the body's mild hangover from a single cup of plum wine the body had drunk at the lodge's welcoming dinner. He stood up. He went to the wardrobe and looked at himself in the small bronze mirror that hung on its inside door. The body was lean and tall. The face was a noble cultivation house's face. Fine bone structure, dark eyes, dark hair tied back at the nape with a simple cord. The face was, by the standard of the novel's social registry, considered handsome. The body's clan tunic, black with the Vorin clan's small silver crest at the collar, fit cleanly. Kade looked at himself for a long count. He went to the desk and sat down. He took, from the desk's single drawer, a sheet of the lodge's pre-cut writing paper and the small bottle of ink the lodge supplied to each guest chamber. He began to write. He wrote slowly and in small, precise characters. The writing was a list. The list was a list of every piece of information his old life memory of the novel had retained about the tournament. He wrote for an hour. By the end of the hour, the list contained the tournament's full 64 cultivator bracket draw, each cultivator's name, clan, and pre-tournament cultivation tier. The tournament's 6-day schedule. Round 1 Monday morning. Round 2 Tuesday morning. Quarterfinal Wednesday. Semifinal Thursday. Final Friday. Closing ceremony Saturday. The known signature techniques of each of the bracket's 23 named cultivators. The 8 cultivators whose techniques the novel had not described. The 33 cultivators who would, by the novel's standards, be eliminated in the first round and whose names the novel had not provided. The protagonist Han Rui's full combat profile. Bronze tier on paper, gold tier in actual capacity through the hidden manual. The signature awakening that would occur in the second round of this tournament. The awakening's specific trigger condition, the protagonist witnessing a specific small act of cruelty by his opponent, which would produce the precise, small structural conditions for the awakening's manifestation. The 3 additional protagonists embedded in the bracket. By the novel's later chapters, 3 other cultivators in this bracket would, across the next decade, become major figures in the protagonist's eventual party. Each was, at the present moment, an unawakened mid to late bronze tier cultivator with hidden capacity that the tournament would, in the original timeline, not reveal because each was, by the bracket's draw, eliminated in the first or second round by the protagonist's eventual rivals. The two senior cultivation observers who would, by the novel's design, attend the tournament in disguise. Master Vren of the Iron Pine sect, the protagonist's grandfather's old friend, who would, in the tournament's final round, formally extend recruitment to the protagonist. Master Show of the Imperial Cultivation Academy, who would, in the tournament's closing ceremony, identify the protagonist as a talent worthy of formal academy recruitment. The small specific detail that the tournament was, by the bracket's secret commercial structure, also a small specific betting market for the city's gambling syndicates. The bracket was published. The odds were posted on the syndicate's betting boards each morning. The body's first-round opponent was a cultivator named Hess Rin, listed at 3-1 to win the round. The body was listed at 3-1 against. The body's second-round projection, against Han Rui, was 40-1 against. Kade looked at the last item on his list. He thought about it for a count of breaths. He wrote a final entry at the bottom of the page. The entry was a single line. The entry read, "I am going to win the tournament. Every fight will be a kill. The first kill is Hess Rin tomorrow morning." He read the entry twice. He folded the page. He put the page in the inside pocket of his tunic. He left the chamber. He went down to the lodge's main hall for breakfast. Chapter 2. The Family. The Vorin clan's tournament party was 9 people. The party was led by Elder Vorin Kess, the clan's 4th-rank elder, a 56-year-old cultivator at high silver tier who had been assigned tournament chaperone duty because the clan's 3 higher-ranked elders had all found small specific reasons to be unavailable. Kess was, by the body's 17 years of memory of him, a competent but disinterested administrator who had been counting the days until his retirement for the past 19 years. Beside Kess at the long breakfast table were Vorin May, Kade's father's second wife, who was Kade's stepmother and who had, by the body's memory, never spoken to him in 7 years. Vorin Drell, May's son and Kade's half-brother, who was 11 and who had been brought along as a tournament observer for his future education. 3 middle-rank clan servants who managed the party's logistics, and 2 senior junior cultivators of the clan who were, by the body's memory, both May's nephews, and both at slightly higher tier than Kade. The seat to Kess's left at the table was empty. The seat was Kade's. Kade walked into the hall. The conversation at the table did not, by any visible adjustment, pause. Kade sat down. A servant brought him a bowl of millet porridge with pickled vegetables. Kess, without looking up from his own bowl, said, "Kade." Kade said, "Elder." Kess said, "Tomorrow at the 2nd hour of morning, you fight your first round." "Yes, Elder. Your opponent is Hess Rin of the Iron Pine Outer Sect, bronze tier, trained in the standard sect curriculum. The bracket has him at 3-1 favored. I am aware, Elder. Your performance will, by clan protocol, determine whether the clan's training stipend for you continues into next year's allocation cycle. If you are eliminated in the first round in a manner that produces visible disgrace, the stipend will be reallocated to a more promising junior cultivator. The clan's expectation is that you will lose in the first round. The clan's expectation is also that the loss will be, by the bracket's standard scoring, within a margin that does not produce visible disgrace. A clean elimination is acceptable. A humiliation is not." Kade said, "Understood, Elder." Kess took another bite of porridge. Kess said, "After tomorrow's elimination, you will, on the clan's standard protocol, attend the remaining tournament days as a spectator in the Vorin party's box. You will not, under any circumstance, engage in any conversation with any other clan's representative without my prior approval. You will not, in particular, approach any of the senior observation officials. The Vorin clan's standing at this tournament is, for various reasons, delicate. Your behavior across the remaining 6 days will be the precise, small, specific quality of a junior cultivator whose presence is unremarkable. Do you understand? Kade said, I understand. Kes said, good. Eat your breakfast. Kade ate his breakfast. Across the table, his stepmother May did not, in the standard pattern of 7 years, address him at any point. Her 2 nephews ignored him. The 11-year-old Drell stared at him with the small, specific quality of a young child who had been told by his mother that the half-brother across the table was the family's small, specific embarrassment. Kade finished the porridge. He stood from the table. He bowed to Kes. He left the hall. He went out the lodge's front gate and into the Imperial City's morning streets. He had, by his quiet calculation, approximately 26 hours before his first-round bout. He had things to do. Chapter 3. The Syndicate. The first thing he had to do was visit a betting syndicate. The novel had, in a small specific scene in Chapter 241, in a flashback that the protagonist's eventual second-in-command provided across 2 pages of dialogue, referenced the existence of the city's 3 major gambling syndicates and had named each. The syndicates ran the bracket's small specific betting market and were, by the city's commercial pattern, 3 of the Imperial City's most operationally efficient illegal organizations. The syndicate Kade went to was the smallest of the 3. He went to the smallest one because the smallest one had, by the novel's reference, a small specific operational pattern that the other 2 did not share. The smallest syndicate's house odds were set by a single individual rather than by a committee. The single individual was a 43-year-old woman named Yen Rava. Yen Rava was, by the novel's small specific reference in Chapter 241, the sharpest odds setter in the Imperial City, who would, across her lifetime, be approximately 41% more accurate than the other 2 syndicates' committees on individual event lines. Kade walked to the smallest syndicate's front door at 10 in the morning. The smallest syndicate's front door was a small specific shop entrance on the south side of the merchant district. The shop sign read Yen Rava Goods and Trade. The shop sold, by every external measure, small lacquered boxes. He went inside. The shop's interior was a single small room with a counter and a small specific display of lacquered boxes on 3 wooden shelves. Behind the counter, a thin, middle-aged woman in dark robes was writing in a ledger. She looked up. She had, by the small specific quality of her eyes, the precise observational focus that the novel's reference had described. She said, "You are not a customer." Kade said, "I am not." She said, "Most non-customers come through the back. The front is for boxes. I came through the front because the back would have required me to know which specific back door to use, and I do not. I am here on what I assume is improper protocol because I would like to place a bet." She set the ledger down. She said, "The bracket bets are placed through the back. The back is in the alley 3 doors east. The door has the Yen Rava seal on the lower left corner. The seal is faint. You will need to look closely. The door opens for a specific small phrase that I will tell you in a moment. Before I tell you the phrase, I would like to know, out of small specific curiosity, what bet you intend to place." Kade said, "I would like to bet 5 gold Imperials on Kade Vorin to win the tournament." She did not, for a count of 3 breaths, respond. She said, "Kade Vorin. Kade Vorin." She said, "The tournament's bracket has Kade Vorin at 3-1 against in the first round. The bracket's projected second-round opponent for Kade Vorin is, pending the first round's other outcome, likely to be Han Rui of the Iron Pine Outer Sect, who the bracket has at 3-1 favored to advance to the 3rd round. The combined odds for Kade Vorin to win the tournament outright are, by my morning calculation, approximately 3,400-1. She studied him. She said, "You understand that you are proposing to bet 5 gold Imperials at 3,400-1. He said, "I understand. The payout, on the win, would be 17,000 gold Imperials. She said, "The smallest syndicate's payout cap on a single bet is, by our house policy, 10,000 gold Imperials. I would, on the bet, only be authorized to pay you 10,000. He said, I will accept the 10,000 cap. She said, You are Kade Vorin. He said, I am. She held his eyes across the counter. She said, The bet is, by every small specific quality of my 43 years of doing this work, the strangest bet I have ever been offered. He said, It is also a bet that, on the precise small specific information you have not yet been given, you should, by your own quiet professional honesty, encourage me to make. The information will alter your house odds across the next 24 hours. The information will, in particular, alter your house odds on every match in the bracket. I would, if you accept the bet at the offered odds, also give you the information after the bet is placed. The information will, on its use, allow you to recover the bet's notional payout cost across the next 6 days through small specific adjustments to your house lines. You will, on every honest accounting, be profitable on the transaction even if I win the tournament. She said, The information, he said, will be given to you after the bet. The bet first. She studied him. She said, The bet's notional cost, at the offered odds with the cap, is 10,000 gold imperials. The 5 gold imperial stake itself is, by my own quiet calculation, sufficient that the bet's risk profile is manageable. The information you are offering, if it is, by my assessment after receiving it, credible, would be valuable. I will, on the small specific gamble of my professional curiosity, accept the bet at the offered odds. He pulled 5 gold imperials from the small specific purse the body's 17 years of memory had told him was the only money the body had access to. The 5 gold imperials were, by the body's memory, the entirety of his tournament travel allowance from the clan. He placed them on the counter. She took them. She wrote a small specific entry in the ledger. She gave him a small specific clay token. The token was the syndicate's standard bet receipt. She said, The information. He said, The bracket has 33 first-round bouts. I will give you the winner of each. I will give you, in addition, the round 2 through round 5 winners as they will, from the first round's outcomes, become projectable. I will give you the names with no specific reasoning. You will, on your own observation across the next 6 days, determine whether to act on the names. If at any point you determine that the names are inaccurate, you may dismiss the information. You will, however, find that the names are accurate. He recited the 33 first-round winners. He recited them at the precise, small, specific pace of a man who had memorized the bracket and was reading it from memory. He included his own name as the winner of the first-round bout against Hesrin. He recited the round 2 through round 5 projections, with explicit conditional branching at the points where the bracket would, by the first round's small specific outcomes, produce non-deterministic matchups. He recited Han Rui as the cultivator he would face in the second round. He recited himself as the winner of the second round. He recited himself as the winner of every subsequent round. He recited himself as the tournament's overall champion. The recitation took 21 minutes. Yin Rava listened. She did not, across the 21 minutes, write anything down. At the end, she said, You have memorized the bracket and projected every outcome. He said, I have. She said, The projections are, by the standard of pre-tournament bracket analysis, implausibly specific. He said, The projections are not based on bracket analysis. She said, What are they based on? He said, I will not, today, tell you what they are based on. I will, if you are interested, tell you on the morning of Saturday's closing ceremony. By Saturday's closing ceremony, you will have observed whether the projections were accurate. You may, on the observation, decide whether you want the source explanation. I will be, by the bet's standard payout protocol, collecting 10,000 gold imperials at the small syndicate's back office on Saturday morning. I will, at the collection, be available for the source conversation if you want it. She studied him for a long count. She said, You intend to win the tournament. He said, I do. She said, You are, at this moment, by every public measure of your tier, incapable of winning the tournament. He said, I am. The incapability will, across the next 6 days, change. She said, the change. He said, is a small specific change in my operational style that will not, by my honest projection, be visible to most of the tournament's observers until I have won my first 3 rounds. By the 3rd round's conclusion, the change will be observable. By the 5th round, it will be, by every observer's read, the most discussed feature of the tournament. By the 6th round, the syndicate's house odds on me will be 1-to-1 or shorter. She said, the syndicate's house odds will move on the 2nd round if I act on your projections. He said, the syndicate's house odds will move on the 2nd round if you act on my projections. The move will, on your professional judgment of the information, be an advantage you elect to take. I would, Yen Rava, recommend you take it. She held his eyes. She said, I will take it. She said, the bet is registered. The token is your receipt. Saturday morning, at the back office, you will collect the 10,000. He said, Saturday morning. She said, one further question. He said, ask. She said, your first round opponent, Hess Rin. The bracket has Hess Rin at 3-to-1 favored. You have just told me you will win the first round. The win is, by every external measure of your respective cultivation tiers, implausible. How will you win it? Kade said, I will kill him. She said, the tournament's rules do not permit killing in the first round. The first round is, by the rules, restricted to non-lethal combat. A killing strike is, by the rules, grounds for disqualification. He said, the rules permit killing in the case of unintended fatality during the bout's standard exchanges. If the kill is, by every external observer's read, accidental and arises from the small specific quality of competitive escalation rather than from the precise, small specific quality of intent, the kill is recorded as an unfortunate but tournament legal outcome. The unfortunate outcome's perpetrator is not disqualified. The perpetrator is, by the rules standard handling, awarded the round and is required to undergo a small specific post-bout sympathy ritual that the tournament's administrative office processes as standard. She said, you are planning the kill to look accidental. He said, I am. She said, the planning will, on every honest measure of the tournament's external observation, succeed? He said, yes. She studied him for a long count. She said, the bet's notional cost is now, by my honest internal recalibration, significantly less than 10,000 gold imperials. The cost is now closer to 4,000 gold imperials. The recalibration is because, by your specific small description of the planning, you are, on every honest reading I can produce, a cultivator who is operating at a tier substantially above the bracket's listed assessment of you. The substantially above tier is, by my professional read, at minimum mid-silver, possibly higher. The bracket's listed assessment of you is, by your demonstration of the kill plan, significantly inaccurate. Kade said, the bracket's listed assessment of me is accurate. She said, explain. He said, my cultivation tier is, by every standard measurement protocol, mid-bronze. I have not, across the past 4 years of clan stipend training, advanced beyond that tier. My capacity to kill Hess Rin tomorrow is not, by my honest description, a function of my cultivation tier. It is a function of small specific knowledge I have about Hess Rin's combat habits that other observers do not have, combined with the small specific knowledge I have about the bout's specific spatial layout that other observers do not have, combined with the small specific knowledge I have about the tournament's medical response protocols that other observers do not have. The combination produces, on the bout's small specific execution, an opportunity to kill Hess Rin in a manner that appears accidental. The opportunity is, by my honest reading, not available to any other bronze-tier cultivator. It is available to me because I have the small specific knowledge. She studied him for a very long count. She said, where did the small specific knowledge come from? He said, the source explanation, on the Saturday morning conversation you have already agreed to consider. She said, accepted. She stood from her chair behind the counter. She extended her hand across the counter. He took it. The handshake was, by every measure of small specific commercial protocol, the closing of a transaction. It was also, by the small specific quality of Yen Rava's gaze across the counter, the opening of a small specific relationship that, by Kade's quiet, honest internal assessment, would across the next 6 days require careful management. He left the shop. He had, by his quiet calculation, 25 hours and 12 minutes before the first round bout. He had 2 more things to do. Chapter 4, the bout site. The second thing he had to do was visit the bout site. The tournament's central arena was a circular stone structure approximately 300 paces in diameter, with a sand floor combat ring at the center and 3 tiers of stone seating around the perimeter. The arena had been built 400 years ago for exactly the small specific function it still served. The combat ring was 40 paces across. The ring's sand was, by tournament protocol, raked smooth each morning before the day's bouts. Kade walked to the arena at noon. The arena was, by the tournament's standard pre-event preparation, open to public viewing across the 2 days before the tournament's opening. He paid the small specific entrance fee and walked into the central seating area. He sat in the 3rd row at the precise position from which he had, by the novel's reference in Chapter 246, calculated that the small specific spatial feature he was interested in would be most clearly visible. The spatial feature was a small specific drainage grate set into the sand floor at the ring's eastern edge. The grate was, by the arena's 400-year-old construction, covered by approximately 3 centimeters of raked sand. The grate was, on the tournament's standard preparation, indistinguishable from the surrounding sand floor at any distance greater than 5 paces. The grate was, by the arena's original construction documents, a drainage point for the small specific quantity of water the arena's maintenance staff used during the post-tournament cleaning cycle. The grate had, by the novel's small reference, been the small specific spatial feature that had caused, in the novel's Chapter 246, the death of an unnamed cultivator who had stepped on it during a bout and had, by the precise small specific quality of the sand's collapse and the cultivator's mid-stride combat positioning, broken his ankle in a manner that produced a fatal fall. The novel's reference had been a single sentence in a flashback. The sentence had been, the arena's drainage grate had killed 1 cultivator across the tournament's 4 centuries of operation by the kind of small specific spatial accident that the tournament's safety records described as unfortunate but unforeseeable. The sentence had not, in the novel, specified which tournament the death had occurred at. Kade had, across the past 2 hours since reading his own list, concluded that the death could be made to occur at this tournament. The conclusion required that the grate be in the small specific position the novel's brief description had implied, that Kade could maneuver Hess Rin onto the grate during the bout's exchanges, that the maneuvering be small specific enough that no observer would identify the maneuver as deliberate. Kade sat in the 3rd row and looked at the sand floor. He identified the grate's position within 20 seconds. The position was, by his eye, exactly where the novel's reference had implied. The position was approximately 4 paces east of the ring's center, on a small specific axis that, by the arena's seating geometry, was on the standard combat direction axis that mid-bronze tier cultivators were trained to use in their opening exchanges. He stood from his seat. He walked down to the ring's perimeter rail. He looked at the sand floor's small specific texture. The sand was, by the standard preparation, smooth. The grate's position was, by the standard preparation, completely concealed. He returned to his seat. He spent the next 2 hours observing the arena's small specific operational pattern. The pre-tournament tour groups came through at staggered intervals. The tour guides explained the arena's history to small specific groups of visiting cultivators. The arena staff occasionally raked specific areas of the sand floor in a small specific maintenance cycle. The medical response team, 3 healers in the tournament's standard medical robes, were positioned at the arena's 3 primary access tunnels. Kade noted the medical response team's positions. He noted, in particular, the small specific positioning of the medical response team's primary healer. The primary healer was, by the team's standard configuration, positioned at the arena's eastern access tunnel. The eastern tunnel was approximately 50 paces from the Great's position. The primary healer's response time, on a standard ring incident, would be, by Kade's calculation, approximately 15 seconds from the moment of injury to the moment of healer's arrival at the casualty's position. 15 seconds was, by Kade's calculation, adequate for the small specific quality of the kill plan he was developing. He left the arena at 3 in the afternoon. He had, by his quiet calculation, 22 hours and 12 minutes before the bout. He had one more thing to do. Chapter 5. Hesrin. The third thing he had to do was observe Hesrin in person. Hesrin was, by the tournament's pre-event protocol, staying at the Iron Pine Sect's tournament lodge on the north side of the Imperial City. The Iron Pine Sect's lodge was the largest of the tournament's sect lodges. It housed approximately 40 Iron Pine representatives across the tournament's 6-day duration. Kade walked to the Iron Pine Lodge at 4 in the afternoon. He did not, by his quiet operational protocol, enter the lodge. He sat at a small specific tea house across the street from the lodge's front gate. He ordered a small pot of cheap green tea. He drank it slowly. He watched the gate. He had, by the novel's small specific reference in Chapter 48, the precise small specific knowledge that Hesrin had, across the 3 days before the tournament, a small specific habit. The habit was, each afternoon at approximately 5 o'clock, Hesrin walked alone from the Iron Pine Lodge to a small specific shrine 4 blocks west, where he performed a small specific pre-bout meditation that lasted approximately 40 minutes. The shrine was, by the novel's small reference, Hesrin's family's clan shrine, which the Iron Pine Outer Sect maintained on behalf of its junior members. The meditation was a small specific ritual. The ritual was, by the novel's small reference, the precise small specific personal ritual that Hesrin had performed every day for the past 4 years of his Outer Sect membership, with the precise small specific consistency that made him one of the sect's most disciplined junior cultivators. The discipline was, by Kade's quiet read of the reference, a vulnerability. A man who performed the same small specific ritual every day at the same small specific time was, by Kade's reading, a man whose movements could be predicted across approximately 40 minutes of unobserved daily routine. Kade waited at the tea house. At 5 o'clock, Hesrin walked out of the Iron Pine Lodge's front gate. Hesrin was 21. He was, by the body's 17 years of memory of the bracket's published profile, a tall, dark-haired cultivator with the small specific build of an Outer Sect disciple who had spent the past 4 years on a sect standard training diet. His tunic was the Iron Pine Outer Sect uniform, green with the sect's small silver pine crest at the collar. He walked west. Kade left the tea house at a distance of approximately 50 paces behind him. He followed Hesrin to the shrine. The shrine was, as the novel had referenced, a small specific stone structure in a side alley 4 blocks west of the Iron Pine Lodge. The shrine had a single small specific altar inside the structure and a small specific stone bench in front of the altar where the meditation was performed. Hesrin entered the shrine. Hesrin began the meditation. Kade, from a small specific position at the alley's opposite end, in the shadow of a residential building's overhanging eave, observed. He observed for 37 minutes. The meditation was, by every external measure, exactly the meditation the novel had referenced. Hesrin sat on the small specific stone bench in the small specific posture of the Iron Pine Outer Sect meditation discipline. He breathed in the small, specific rhythm of the sect's standard breath cycle. He did not, at any point in the 37 minutes, move beyond the small, specific micro-adjustments of a disciplined meditator. At the end of the 37 minutes, Hess Rin stood from the bench. He bowed to the altar. He left the shrine. He walked back to the Iron Pine Lodge at the same small, specific pace at which he had walked out. Kade did not follow him back. Kade returned to the tea house. He paid for a second small pot of tea. He sat at the same table. He thought through the small, specific details of the bout plan one more time. The plan was, by his honest internal review, solid. He left the tea house at 6 in the evening. He returned to the Vorin clan lodge. He attended the lodge's small, specific evening meal with the clan party. He sat at his assigned seat. He did not speak unless addressed. He was addressed only once, by Elder Kess, who confirmed the bout's scheduled time and reminded him to perform with appropriate dignity in defeat. Kade confirmed the bout's scheduled time. He went to his chamber after the meal. He performed the small, specific pre-bout cultivation cycle that the body's 17 years of memory had told him was the body's standard pre-bout routine. The cycle was, by the body's training, a 60-minute mid-bronze tier maintenance protocol that would, by its standard effect, restore the body's mana channels to their full standard operational capacity for the next morning's bout. The cycle completed at 10 in the evening. He went to bed. He slept the small, specific quality of sleep that a man who had spent the day developing a precise, small, specific kill plan slept, solid, dreamless, and finished by 5 in the morning, when the body's 17 years of trained discipline woke it automatically. He had, by his quiet calculation at 5 in the morning, approximately 4 hours before the bout. He performed the body's standard morning warm-up. He ate the small, specific morning meal the lodge's kitchen had prepared. He dressed in the body's tournament tunic. At 8:30 in the morning, he walked from the Vorin Lodge to the arena. The bout began at 9. Part 2. The Bracket. Chapter 6. Hess Rin. The bout began at the second hour of morning, in the central ring of the Imperial Arena, in front of approximately 11,000 spectators in the 3 tiers of stone seating. Hess Rin entered the ring from the western tunnel. Kade entered from the eastern tunnel. The two cultivators bowed to the arena's central judge, a senior cultivation official named Master Voss, who had been the tournament's central judge for 19 consecutive years, and took their positions at the ring's opposite edges. Master Voss raised the standard signal flag. Master Voss said, "Begin." Hess Rin moved. The move was, by every external measure of bracket expectation, the standard Iron Pine outer sect opening. Hess Rin advanced from the ring's western edge at the standard bronze tier combat pace. His opening technique was the sect's signature first exchange technique, a small specific straight-line palm strike with mid-bronze tier mana projection. The technique was, by Kade's small specific knowledge of the bout's site, the precise opening that Kade had calculated Hess Rin would use. The straight-line palm strike's standard combat trajectory was, by the Iron Pine outer sect's curriculum, along the ring's east-west axis. Hess Rin's opening, on the trajectory, would carry him forward at a small specific pace that would, by Kade's calculation, place his lead foot at the great's position at the precise small specific moment in the technique's third step. Kade did not, on Hess Rin's opening, retreat. Kade also did not engage. Kade, by the small specific quality of his preparation, performed a small specific defensive movement that the Vorin clan's standard mid-bronze training had taught him as the body's signature opening counter. The movement was a small specific lateral step to the west, with a small specific defensive palm projection that would, by the standard exchange's mechanics, meet Hess Rin's straight-line strike at the strike's full extension. The lateral step's specific small specific quality was that it placed Kade's defensive position at a precise small specific spot in the ring that, by the arena's geometry, was 3 paces west of the grate. Hess Rin's straight-line palm strike, on its standard extension, would, by Kade's calculation, bring Hess Rin's lead foot onto the grate at the moment of the strike's contact with Kade's defensive position. The contact occurred. The two palm strikes met at the precise, small, specific position Kade had calculated. Hess Rin's lead foot was on the grate. The strike's standard exchange momentum required Hess Rin to commit his weight forward into the strike's follow-through. Hess Rin committed. The grate's small, specific structural failure, by the arena's 400 years of slow corrosion under the sand floor's standard drainage cycle, produced a small, specific collapse under Hess Rin's lead foot. Hess Rin's lead foot dropped approximately 3 centimeters into the small, specific gap that the grate's collapse produced. The drop was, by every external measure of standard combat observation, invisible to the arena's spectators. The drop was, however, sufficient to disrupt Hess Rin's small, specific balance at the precise, small, specific moment of his strike's follow-through. Hess Rin's body, by the small, specific quality of the standard combat follow-through, pitched forward. The forward pitch was, by every external measure, a small, specific stumble. A small, specific stumble was, by tournament observation patterns, a routine combat event that occurred in approximately 1 in every 12 bouts. The arena's spectators registered the stumble. The spectators did not, on the standard observation pattern, register the stumble as significant. The stumble's small specific kinetics, however, were significant. Hess Rin's body, in the forward pitch, lost the small specific balance required for him to maintain the standard bronze-tier defensive aura that the outer sect curriculum taught its disciples to maintain throughout all combat exchanges. The aura, by its small specific maintenance requirement, required the cultivator's continuous focused mana channel attention. The focused attention required, in turn, the cultivator's stable physical balance. For the precise small specific duration of approximately 1 second, Hess Rin's defensive aura was, by the stumble's kinetics, not maintained. Kade, in the same 1 second, was, by the small specific quality of his lateral defensive position, at the precise small specific distance from Hess Rin's exposed body that allowed a small specific second exchange. He used the second. The small specific second exchange was, by his preparation, not a kill strike. The second exchange was a small specific counterstrike at Hess Rin's lead shoulder. The counterstrike's force was, by Kade's calibration, approximately 3/4 of the strike's standard mid-bronze tier projection. The force was, by the calibration, insufficient to kill Hess Rin under normal exchange conditions. The force was, by every external observer's read, a routine counterstrike of the standard category that the bout's standard exchange pattern was producing. The counterstrike, however, landed at the precise, small, specific angle that, by Kade's careful study of the body's 17 years of training and the body's small, specific knowledge of the Vorin clan's signature bronze-tier strike, produced a small, specific rotational vector on Hess Rin's already unstable body. Hess Rin's body rotated. The rotation was, by the standard combat exchange measurement, a small specific tumble of approximately 90 degrees. The tumble brought Hess Rin's head down toward the ring's sand floor at the small specific position where, by Kade's careful study of the arena's geometry, the grate's collapsed edge was now exposed. The exposed edge was, by the arena's 400-year-old construction, a small specific iron lip approximately 3 centimeters wide. The lip was, by its small specific composition, harder than standard sand floor. Hess Rin's temple struck the lip at the precise, small specific velocity that the combined kinetics of the stumble and the rotation had produced. The strike was, by every external measure of standard combat observation, a small specific unfortunate accident. The strike's small specific kinetics, however, produced a small specific cranial fracture at Hess Rin's left temple. Hess Rin lost consciousness immediately. The arena's medical response team, by the small specific position of the primary healer at the eastern access tunnel, arrived at Hess Rin's position in approximately 12 seconds. The primary healer attempted resuscitation across the next 4 minutes. The resuscitation failed. Rin was pronounced dead at the 8th minute of the bout. The arena's spectators, across the 4 minutes of the resuscitation, registered the small specific tragedy of a tournament fatality with the small specific quality that tournament audiences had registered the previous 400 years of similar tragedies. There was, by the standard observation pattern, a moment of stunned silence, followed by a small specific murmur of conversation, followed by the Arena Administrative Office's standard small specific announcement of the bout's tournament legal outcome. The announcement was, the round is awarded to Kade Vorin of the Vorin clan. The bout's outcome is recorded as an unintended fatality of the small specific tournament legal category that the tournament's rules permit. Kade Vorin advances to the second round. Master Voss, the central judge, looked at Kade across the ring. Master Voss did not, in the small specific count of breaths, speak. Master Voss inclined his head. Master Voss said, the round is awarded. The next bout begins in 20 minutes. Kade bowed to Master Voss. He bowed in the direction of Rin's body, in the small specific tournament protocol gesture that a victor was required to perform after a fatal bout. He walked off the ring through the eastern tunnel. He had, by every external measure of the small specific bout, performed exactly the small specific combat exchange that a mid-bronze tier cultivator was permitted to perform under the tournament's standard rules. He had, by every external measure, also produced the bout's specific outcome through a small specific unfortunate accident. No observer in the arena had, by Kade's calculation, registered the bout as anything other than an unfortunate accidental fatality. The arena's spectators were, however, registering one small specific quality of the outcome that would, by the next morning's news, become the bracket's small specific topic. The quality was that the bracket's 3-to-1 favored cultivator had, in the bout's opening exchange, died. The bracket had shifted. The body's 17 years of memory had a small specific phrase the body's old teacher had taught the body. The phrase was, the bracket moves on the first round small specific surprises. The bracket had, at 9:15 in the morning of the tournament's first day, moved. Kade walked back to the Vorin clan's tournament box. Elder Kess was waiting. Elder Kess was, by every visible measure, pale. Elder Kess said, Kade. Kade said, Elder. Elder Kess said, you killed Rin. Kade said, by every external measure of the bout's small specific outcome, the bout's fatality was an accidental product of the standard exchange's small specific kinetics. The tournament's administrative office has recorded the outcome under the small specific category of tournament legal accidental fatality. The clan's reputation is, by the bout's specific outcome, not damaged. The clan's tournament representation is, by the bout's specific outcome, advanced to the second round. Elder Kess looked at him for a long count. Elder Kess said, the second round, Kade. The second round is Han Rui. Kade said, I am aware, Elder. Elder Kess said, Han Rui is, by every bracket projection, bronze tier on paper and substantially higher in actual capacity. The bracket has Han Rui at 3-to-1 favored to advance to the third round. The bracket projection is, by every external measure, the precise small specific projection that you, after defeating Rin, are now expected to lose to. Kade said, I am aware, Elder. Elder Kess said, your performance against Han Rui tomorrow morning will, on the small specific shift in the bracket's perception of you, be observed by my honest estimate, approximately 40,000 spectators. The crowd's reading of your performance will, on the small specific tournament reputation effect, materially affect the Vorin clan's standing at this tournament. Kade said, I am aware, Elder. Elder Kess said, Kade, listen to me. The clan does not, under any small specific reading of the tournament's reputation effects, require you to win against Han Rui. The clan requires only that you lose with the small specific dignity that the bracket's projection permits. A dignified loss to Han Rui will produce the bracket projected outcome and will, on every honest reading of the clan's tournament standing, be acceptable. A small specific attempt to repeat today's outcome, that is to say, a small specific attempt to win against Han Rui through any small specific tactical mechanism beyond the standard bracket exchange, would, on the bracket's small specific shift, be observed by the arena's spectators as a small specific demonstration of the Vorin clan's tactical disregard for the tournament's standard small specific gentlemanly conduct. The Vorin clan's standing would, on the small specific observation, be damaged. The damage would, by my honest estimate, produce a small specific clan political response that the clan's senior elders would, on the response's processing, attribute to your specific small specific tournament performance. The attribution would, by the clan's standard small specific political pattern, end your clan stipend, end your noble registration, and produce, in the precise small specific phrasing the clan's senior elders favor for such attributions, the small specific quiet relocation of the junior cultivator to a small specific border outpost where the cultivator's continued cultivation activities would not, by their small specific quality, embarrass the clan further. Kade said, I understand, Elder. Elder Kess said, so tomorrow morning, against Han Rui, you will fight with the small specific gentlemanly dignity the bracket's projection requires. You will lose. The loss will be clean. The clan's standing will be, by the loss's small specific quality, preserved. Do you understand? Kade said, I understand. Elder Kess said, good. You will, across the remaining day, return to the lodge and rest. You will not, under any circumstance, return to the arena until tomorrow morning's bout. You will not, in particular, speak to any small specific tournament official, any small specific spectator, or any small specific external party about today's bout. The bout's tournament legal outcome is registered. The matter is, by the tournament's standard small specific protocol, closed. Kade said, understood, Elder. Elder Kess turned and walked away. Kade returned to the Vorin clan lodge. He went to his chamber. He sat at the desk. He took out the folded list he had written the previous morning. He read the last entry on the list one more time. I am going to win the tournament. Every fight will be a kill. The first kill is Hess Rin tomorrow morning. He drew, beside the entry, a small specific check mark. He wrote, beneath the entry, a second entry. The entry read, the second kill is Han Rui tomorrow morning. He folded the list. He put it back in his tunic. He performed the body's standard post-bout cultivation cycle. He went to bed at noon. He slept. He had, by his quiet calculation at noon, approximately 21 hours before the second round bout. Chapter 7. Han Rui. The second round bout began at the second hour of morning on the tournament's second day. The arena was at full attendance. The bracket's first round had, by the previous day's 28 other bouts, produced the standard pattern of small specific upsets and small specific confirmations that every tournament's first round produced. The bracket's second round was, by the arena's spectators' collective expectation, the tournament's first major separation round, in which the bracket's stronger cultivators would, by the round's projections, advance toward the quarterfinals, and the weaker would, by the same projections, be eliminated. The bracket's second round attention was concentrated on three small specific bouts. The first of the three was the bout between Kade Vorin and Han Rui. The bout was the bracket's most discussed second round match. The discussion was, by the previous day's small specific events, focused on the small specific question of whether the bracket's 3-1 favored protagonist would, by his expected standard exchange pattern, eliminate the cultivator who had, by the previous day's accidental fatality, produced the bracket's first major surprise. Han Rui entered the ring from the western tunnel. Han Rui was, at the precise small specific moment Kade saw him from the eastern tunnel, exactly the cultivator the novel's small specific descriptions had described. 18 years old, tall and lean, with the small specific physical conditioning of 3 years of hidden training. Dark hair. The small specific quietness that the novel had described as Han Rui's small specific signature trait. Han Rui's tunic was the iron pine outer sex green and silver. The two cultivators bowed to Master Voss. They took their positions. Master Voss raised the signal flag. Master Voss said, "Begin." Han Rui did not, on the bout's opening, move. Han Rui's small specific opening was, by the novel's small specific description, the precise small specific quietness that he had used in every recorded outer sect bout across the past 2 years. The quietness was a small specific defensive posture in which Han Rui stood at the ring's western edge and waited for his opponent to commit to an opening exchange. The posture was, by the Iron Pine Outer Sex curriculum, a small specific defensive specialty that the sect's senior instructors had refined across the past 2 decades. The posture's small specific operational logic was, by waiting, Han Rui would force his opponent into the small specific tactical choice of committing first. The opponent's commitment would, on the small specific structural mechanics of standard combat exchanges, reveal the opponent's preferred opening technique. The revelation would, by Han Rui's small specific quietness, allow Han Rui to select the precise small specific counter technique that would, on the opening's exchange, produce a small specific positional advantage that Han Rui could, across the following exchanges, develop into the bout's controlling pattern. The posture was, by every external measure of Han Rui's outer sect record, Han Rui's signature small specific opening. Kade had, by the novel's small specific reference in Chapter 47, the precise small specific knowledge of the posture's small specific operational mechanics. He had also, by the same chapter's small specific reference, the precise small specific knowledge of the posture's small specific vulnerability. The vulnerability was, the posture required Han Rui to maintain, across the entire defensive weight, a small specific cultivation channel focus in his lower abdominal mana cluster. The focus was, by the Iron Pine Outer Sex small specific training, the mana channel positioning that allowed the posture's small specific defensive aura to remain at full readiness across an extended wait. The positioning was, by the small specific quality of the body's standard mana channel anatomy, a small specific concentration of cultivation pressure in a small specific physical location. The location was, by Kade's quiet study of the body's 17 years of memory of the Vorin clan's signature small specific cultivation techniques, the precise small specific physical location that the Vorin clan's signature iron needle projection technique was designed to target. The iron needle projection was a small specific bronze tier projection technique that the Vorin clan had, across approximately 4 generations, refined as the clan's signature small specific opening technique. The technique's small specific function was to project a small specific point of focused mana channel pressure from the practitioner's index finger across approximately 20 paces of distance at a small specific velocity that would, on the projection's contact with the opponent's body, produce a small specific structural disruption of the opponent's mana channel positioning at the precise, small specific point of contact. The technique's standard combat application was, by every external measure of the clan's tournament record use, a small specific opening exchange technique that the clan's junior cultivators used as a small specific tactical probing move. The probing produced, on contact, a small specific disruption of the opponent's standard combat posture that the clan's junior cultivators could, across the following exchanges, develop into a small specific positional advantage. The probing was, by every external measure of the technique's combat record, a small specific non-lethal opening. The probing's small specific lethality, however, was a small specific function of the precise, small specific physical location the probing's contact point landed. If the contact point landed at the precise, small specific location of an opponent's lower abdominal mana cluster, the precise small specific location where Han Rui's small specific defensive posture had concentrated his cultivation pressure, the probing would produce a small specific structural disruption of the mana cluster's small specific cultivation flow. The structural disruption would, by the cluster's small specific anatomy, produce a small specific cascading disruption of the body's mana channel network across approximately 3 seconds. The cascading disruption would, by the body's small specific cultivation channel structure, produce a small specific failure of the body's cardiac mana support. The cardiac mana support's failure would, by the body's small specific anatomy, produce a small specific cardiac event of the precise, small specific category that the tournament's medical response team would record as an unfortunate cardiac response to standard combat exchange pressure. The unfortunate cardiac response would be, by every external measure of standard tournament documentation, a fatal accident. Kade, at the ring's eastern edge, with Master Voss having signaled the bout's beginning, committed. He raised his right hand. He performed the iron needle projection. The technique's small specific projection traveled across the 20 paces between the two cultivators at the standard small specific velocity that the Vorin clan's signature opening produced. Han Rui, by the small specific quietness of his posture, did not, in the precise small specific moment of the projection's release, move. The projection's contact point landed at the precise, small specific physical location of Han Rui's lower abdominal mana cluster. The contact's small specific structural disruption produced, by the precise, small specific anatomy of Han Rui's defensive posture mana concentration, the precise small specific cascading disruption that Kade had calculated. Han Rui's mana channel network, across approximately 2.5 seconds, cascaded into a small specific structural failure. In the same 2.5 seconds, Han Rui registered the disruption. In the same 2.5 seconds, Han Rui, by the small specific quality of his 3 years of hidden training under his dead grandfather's small specific manual, attempted the small specific awakening that the novel's small specific design had calibrated for this precise, small specific bout. The awakening required, by its small specific structural mechanics, the cultivator's full and uninterrupted mana channel network to perform a small specific resonance projection across the body's complete cultivation foundation. The cascading disruption that Kade's iron needle projection had produced was, by every honest measure of the awakening's small specific structural requirements, a small specific interference of exactly the kind that the awakening could not tolerate. The awakening, on its attempted execution, produced a small specific catastrophic backlash through Han Rui's compromised mana channel network. The backlash, on its small specific propagation through Han Rui's body, produced a small specific cardiac event of the precise, small specific category that the tournament's medical response team would record as the unfortunate cardiac response to standard combat exchange pressure. Han Rui collapsed at the ring's western edge. The collapse occurred at approximately 3 seconds into the bout. The arena's medical response team arrived at Han Rui's position in approximately 10 seconds. The medical response team attempted resuscitation across the next 11 minutes. The resuscitation failed. Han Rui was pronounced dead at the 14th minute of the bout. The arena's 11,000 spectators registered the small specific tragedy of a second tournament fatality with the small specific quality that tournament audiences had registered the previous 400 years of similar tragedies. There was a small specific moment of stunned silence, followed by a small specific murmur of conversation, followed by the arena administrative office's standard small specific announcement. The announcement was, "The round is awarded to Kade Vorin of the Vorin clan." The bout's outcome is recorded as an unintended fatality of the small specific tournament legal category that the tournament's rules permit. Kade Vorin advances to the third round. Master Voss looked at Kade across the ring. Master Voss did not, in the count of breaths, speak. Master Voss inclined his head. Master Voss said, "The round is awarded. The next bout begins in 20 minutes. Kade bowed to Master Voss. He bowed in the direction of Han Rui's body, in the small specific tournament protocol gesture that a victor was required to perform after a fatal bout. He walked off the ring through the eastern tunnel. The arena's spectators, by the small specific quality of having now observed the bracket's steppingstone cultivator produce 2 consecutive fatal accidents against the bracket's 2 most favored cultivators in his bracket, began, in the small specific way that tournament audiences began such things, to talk. The talk was, by the standard tournament reputation effect, the small specific shift that Kade had calculated. The shift was the small specific shift that Yin Rava, at the smallest syndicate's back office across the Imperial City, was at this exact small specific moment registering on her house's small specific odds boards. By the end of the second round's 28 bouts, the smallest syndicate's house odds on Kade Vorin to win the tournament had moved from 3,400 to 1 to 96 to 1. The 2 larger syndicates' house odds had moved similarly. The Imperial City's 3 gambling syndicates had, across the 2 consecutive bouts, collectively registered Kade Vorin as a small specific tournament event. Chapter 8. The Conversation. Elder Kess came to Kade's chamber at the lodge at the 3rd hour of afternoon. Elder Kess did not knock. Elder Kess opened the door. Elder Kess entered the chamber. Elder Kess closed the door behind him. Elder Kess walked to Kade's desk, where Kade was, by the small specific routine, performing the body's standard post-bout cultivation cycle. Elder Kess said, "Stop the cycle." Kade stopped the cycle. Kade looked up. Elder Kess said, "I am going to ask you one question. The question requires the small specific quality of an honest answer. The question is, what are you?" Kade looked at him. He said, "Elder, I am the same cultivator I was 3 days ago. The small specific shift you have observed is, by my honest description, not a shift in my cultivation tier. It is a shift in my small specific tactical approach to the tournament's bouts." Elder Kess said, "2 cultivators have died at your hands in 2 bouts." Kade said, "2 cultivators have died at the tournament's standard small specific accidental fatality category, in bouts in which I was the surviving cultivator. The tournament's administrative office has registered both fatalities under the small specific category of tournament legal accidental fatality. The category's small specific rules permit my continued participation." Elder Kess said, "The rules permit your continued participation. The rules do not, however, address the small specific question of whether the clan's standing at this tournament has, by the small specific shift in the bracket's perception of you, been damaged." Kade said, "Elder, the clan's standing has been substantially improved. The bracket has, by the smallest syndicate's morning odds posting at the second round's conclusion, moved my line to 96 to 1. The line was 3,400 to 1 at yesterday morning. The line's small specific shift is, by every reading of the tournament's reputation effect literature, the precise small specific shift that produces a clan's most positive tournament reputation impact. The clan's standing among the Imperial City's commercial classes has, by my honest projection, materially improved across the past 24 hours. Elder Kess said, "The clan's standing among the Imperial City's commercial classes is, by the clan's small specific protocol, irrelevant. The clan's standing among the Empire's senior cultivation houses is the small specific reputation effect the clan tracks. The senior cultivation house's assessment of today's small specific events will, on the standard pattern, be that the Vorin clan has, by my honest projection, produced a small specific junior cultivator who has, in his first tournament, killed two opponents through small specific tactical mechanisms that the Empire's cultivation traditions regard as a small specific violation of the tournament's gentlemanly conduct. The assessment will not be, Kade, by any honest reading I can apply, positive. Kade looked at the elder for a long count. He said, Elder, I would like to make a small specific proposal. Elder Kess said, The proposal? Kade said, The proposal is that I withdraw from the Vorin clan's formal sponsorship for the remainder of the tournament. The withdrawal will be, by the tournament's administrative procedure, a small specific filing that will, on its processing, declare me an independent cultivator for the tournament's remaining 4 bouts. The independent cultivator filing will, on its small specific reputation effect, transfer the entirety of the tournament's small specific gentlemanly conduct judgment from the Vorin clan to me personally. The clan's standing among the Empire's senior cultivation houses will, on the filing, be, by my honest projection, restored to the precise small specific quality it held 3 days ago. I will, on the filing, continue the tournament's bouts on my own small specific authority. The bout's outcomes will, on the filing, be, by the Empire's cultivation tradition, attributed to my personal small specific tactical approach rather than to the Vorin clan's institutional standards. Elder Kess looked at him for a long count. Elder Kess said, You are proposing to formally separate yourself from the clan mid-tournament. Kade said, I am. Elder Kess said, The separation would, on the clan's small specific membership protocols, be, by the clan's senior elders' standard reading, equivalent to a small specific clan resignation. Kade said, It would be equivalent to a small specific clan resignation. Elder Kess said, You would be, by the clan's small specific membership protocols, no longer a Vorin. Kade said, I would be no longer a Vorin. Elder Kess studied him for a very long count. He said, Kade, the clan has, across 17 years, paid for your training stipend. The clan has, across the same period, provided your noble registration. The clan's senior elders have, on the standard pattern, considered your continued clan membership a small specific institutional investment. The investment's small specific reputational outcome has been, by every measure across 17 years, a small specific minor success. The institutional investment is, by the clan's standard internal accounting, not insignificant. Your proposed resignation would be, on the clan's standard accounting, a small specific loss of the investment. Kade said, Elder, the clan's institutional investment in my training stipend across 17 years was, by the clan's standard records, approximately 400 gold imperials. The investment in my noble registration was approximately 200 gold imperials. The total institutional investment is 600 gold imperials. I will, on the small specific separation filing, provide a small specific compensation payment to the clan in the amount of 600 gold imperials, plus an additional 400 gold imperials as a small specific gesture of gratitude. The total compensation will be 1,000 gold imperials. The compensation will, on the standard clan accounting, fully discharge the institutional investment. Elder Kess looked at him for the longest count of the conversation. Elder Kess said, You have 1,000 gold imperials. Kade said, I will, by Saturday morning, have 10,000 gold imperials. The compensation will be paid on Saturday morning. Elder Kess said, The syndicate bet. Kade said, The syndicate bet. Elder Kess studied him. Elder Kess said, You have planned this. Kade said, I have planned this. The small specific separation is, by the precise small specific structural shape of the tournament's remaining bouts, the optimal small specific outcome for both the clan and for me. The clan's reputation is preserved. My tournament participation continues. The compensation is paid. The institutional investment is recovered. The small specific separation is, by every honest measure of both parties' interests, the small specific outcome that benefits both. Elder Kess was quiet for a long count. Elder Kess said, Kade. Kade said, Elder. Elder Kess said, I am, in this small specific moment, going to do a small specific thing that, by the clan's internal protocols across 40 years, I have not, in any small specific small previous moment, done. I am going to extend to you, on my own personal authority, a small specific personal courtesy that the clan's senior elders would, by their standard reading of the courtesy's small specific implications, regard as a small specific minor breach of my elder responsibilities. The courtesy is that I am going to ask you a question that, by the clan's standard protocol, I am not entitled to ask. The question is, what is your small specific personal objective? Kade looked at the elder. He said, my small specific personal objective is to win the tournament. Elder Kess said, and after the tournament? Kade said, after the tournament, my small specific personal objective is to become, by the small specific reputation effect that winning the tournament produces, one of the Empire's most operationally significant independent cultivators. The reputation effect, on its standard small specific operational application, will provide me with the small specific access to senior cultivation training, senior cultivation resources, and senior cultivation political networks that the Vorin clan's small specific institutional capacity could not, across the next 20 years, provide me with. The access will produce, across the next 20 years, my small specific advancement to senior cultivation tiers that the Vorin clan's clan resource ceiling would have, by the clan's standard internal projections, never permitted. Elder Kess studied him for a long count. Elder Kess said, you are, Kade, proposing a small specific personal trajectory that the Vorin clan's small specific institutional capacity is, by your honest read, a constraint on rather than an enabler of. Kade said, I am. Elder Kess said, the small specific separation is, by your honest read, the small specific structural action that removes the constraint. Kade said, it is. Elder Kess was quiet for a very long count. He said, I will, on my own personal authority, process the small specific separation filing this evening. The filing will, on the tournament's standard procedure, be official by tomorrow morning's third round. The compensation will be paid on Saturday morning. The compensation will, on the clan's standard accounting, be, by my own personal handling, characterized as a small specific voluntary disengagement settlement rather than a clan resignation. The characterization will, on the small specific clan political pattern, produce a more favorable internal narrative than a resignation would. The narrative will be, by my honest projection, that the Vorin clan's senior elders, on observing the cultivator's small specific exceptional tournament performance, mutually agreed with the cultivator to a small specific independent pursuit of his cultivation development outside the constraints of the clan's small specific institutional ceiling. The mutual agreement narrative is, by every honest measure of the clan's small specific political pattern, the small specific narrative that maximally preserves the clan's reputation. Kade said, thank you, Elder. Elder Kess said, Kade, I want to say one further thing. Kade said, Elder. Elder Kess said, the small specific quality of your tournament performance across the past 2 days has been, by my honest 40-year reading of tournament observation, the most operationally efficient first 2 rounds I have ever personally witnessed. The efficiency has been, by my honest reading, not a function of small specific tactical accident. It has been a function of small specific deliberate preparation. The deliberate preparation has been, by my honest reading, not the small specific deliberate preparation of a mid-bronze tier junior cultivator who has stumbled into a small specific lucky bracket. It has been the small specific deliberate preparation of a cultivator who is, in the small specific quality of his operational understanding of the bracket, substantially older and substantially more experienced than a 19-year-old junior cultivator could be. The small specific quality is, Kade, by my honest reading, the precise small specific quality of a cultivator who has, by some small specific structural mechanism I do not have the language for, encountered the tournament's small specific outcomes before. Elder Kess studied him. Elder Kess said, I am not asking you to confirm or deny the observation. I am, Kade, observing it for my own personal small specific reference. The observation will, by my honest internal reading, never leave this chamber. Kade said, Thank you, Elder. Elder Kess said, Go win the tournament. Elder Kess turned. Elder Kess walked out of the chamber. Elder Kess closed the door behind him. Kade sat at the desk for a long count. He resumed the post-bout cultivation cycle. He had, by his quiet calculation, 21 hours before the third round. Chapter 9. Yin Rava. Yin Rava came to Kade's chamber at the 8th hour of evening. She did not, like Elder Kess, fail to knock. She knocked twice. She waited. Kade opened the door. She was, by every measure of her small specific arrival at the lodge, formally dressed. She wore the small specific business robes of a senior commercial professional of the Imperial City. She had a small specific commercial briefcase in her left hand. She said, Vorin Kade. He said, Yin Rava. She said, I would like, with your permission, to come inside. He stepped back. She entered. He closed the door. She set the briefcase on the desk. She turned. She said, The second round. He said, The second round. She said, You killed Han Rui. He said, By the standard small specific tournament legal category of accidental fatality during standard combat exchanges, yes. She said, Han Rui was, by the Imperial City's small specific cultivation network's quiet read, substantially more capable than his bracket profile indicated. The capability had been, across the past 3 years, the subject of small specific quiet discussion among the Imperial City's senior cultivation observers. The discussion had, by my honest professional read of the discussion, concluded that Han Rui would, by his small specific hidden training, awaken a small specific bloodline signature technique at this tournament. The awakening would, on the standard pattern, occur in his second-round bout against the small specific bracket stepping stone cultivator that the bracket had paired him against. Kade said, The stepping stone cultivator was me. Yin Rava said, The stepping stone cultivator was you. She studied him. She said, The second round did not produce the awakening. The second round produced, by every external measure, Han Rui's death. Kade said, It did. She said, The bracket has, by the past 2 days' small specific shifts, produced a small specific structural shift in the Imperial City's senior cultivation observation. The shift is, by my honest professional read, the precise small specific shift that I had, at yesterday morning's bet, projected on the small specific information you had provided. The shift's small specific operational consequence is that I have, across the past day, recovered the bet's notional payout cost across small specific adjustments to my house lines by approximately 11,000 gold imperials. The recovery is, by my honest internal accounting, sufficient that I am, on every honest professional measure, now profitable on the bet regardless of the tournament's final outcome. Kade said, As I projected. She said, As you projected. She was quiet for a count. She said, The small specific information that you said you would provide on Saturday morning. Kade said, Yes. She said, I would like, on my own small specific personal initiative, separate from the small specific commercial transaction of the bet, to ask whether you would consider providing this small specific information now. The provision would be, by my honest description, a small specific personal courtesy from you to me, on the small specific recognition that I have, across the past day, acted on the bet's projections in a manner that has, on my honest internal accounting, produced a small specific commercial advantage to my syndicate that I would, on the standard small specific commercial protocol, like to acknowledge with a small specific personal gesture. Kade studied her. He said, "The small specific personal gesture." She said, "The small specific personal gesture is, by my honest professional preference, that I would like to know what you are before Saturday morning." The preference is, Kade, by my honest internal accounting, not a small specific operational requirement. It is a small specific personal curiosity. I have, across 43 years of my professional life, encountered approximately 4 cultivators whose small specific operational behavior I could not, on my honest professional read, explain through the standard cultivation frameworks. Each of the 4 was, by my eventual investigation, a small specific cultivation anomaly of the kind that the Empire's cultivation tradition has, across the past 3 centuries, documented in small specific archival records. You are, by my honest professional read, the 5th such cultivator. The 5th is, by the precise small specific quality of your operational behavior, substantially more anomalous than the previous 4. The anomaly is, Yin Rava is telling you, on my own honest personal accounting, the small specific reason for the personal curiosity. Kade looked at her. He sat with the question for a long count. He said, "Yin Rava." She said, "Kade." He said, "The small specific information you are asking for is, by my honest professional assessment, operationally dangerous to share. The information's danger is, by my honest read, that any small specific party who possesses the information could, on the information's structural mechanics, derive a small specific operational understanding of my small specific tournament strategy that would, on the standard cultivation political pattern, be of significant commercial and personal value. The value would, on the standard pattern, motivate the party to either monetize the information through small specific external sale or to act on the information through small specific personal application to the tournament's remaining bouts. Either action would, on my honest projection, materially damage my tournament strategy." Yin Rava said, "I would not, on the small specific information's receipt, take either action." Kade said, "How do I know?" She said, "You know because, Kade, by every honest professional assessment of my 43-year commercial track record, I have, across the entirety of my professional life, not violated a small specific commercial confidentiality I have agreed to. The track record is, by the Imperial City's small specific commercial reputation network, the precise small specific reason I have been able to operate the smallest syndicate as a single individual odds-setting operation for 19 years. The reputation is, by the city's small specific commercial pattern, my single most valuable professional asset. I will not, on the small specific information's receipt, damage the asset through the small specific commercial gain of a single short-term monetization. The track record is the small specific evidence." Kade studied her for a long count. He said, "If I tell you, I would be telling you because, by every honest measure of the past 2 days' small specific operational interactions, I have concluded that the small specific commercial relationship we have begun could, by my honest projection, develop into a small specific operational partnership that would, on the precise small specific structural shape of my post-tournament objectives, be of significant operational value to me. The partnership would require, on its small specific structural mechanics, a precise small specific level of mutual trust that the information sharing is, by my honest read, the foundational moment for. The partnership would also, on its precise small specific structural mechanics, require, by my honest assessment, that the partnership be, Yin Rava, substantially more comprehensive than a standard commercial partnership." She said, "Substantially more comprehensive." He said, "Substantially more comprehensive." She studied him. She said, "You are, at 19 years of small specific apparent age, with the precise, small, specific quality of operational understanding that has produced 2 consecutive bracket-defining bouts in 2 consecutive mornings, proposing a small, specific personal partnership with a 43-year-old commercial professional whose institutional standing in the Imperial City is, by every external measure, substantially greater than yours. He said, I am. She said, the small, specific personal partnership's small, specific structural shape. He said, the small, specific personal partnership's small, specific structural shape is, by my honest reading at this small, specific moment of preliminary discussion, that you and I would, across the next 20 years, operate as a precise small, specific dyad in which my small, specific cultivation capacity and your small, specific commercial capacity would, by their precise small, specific complementary application, produce, by my honest projection, a substantially larger small, specific operational result than either of us, individually, could produce. The dyad would, on its standard small, specific operational pattern, be, across the 20 years, a small, specific personal partnership in which the small, specific personal dimension would, by its precise small, specific structural inevitability under the standard small, specific commercial personal partnership models, develop in whatever small, specific direction the precise, small, specific quality of our continued interaction produced. She studied him for a very long count. She said, You are 19. He said, By the body's small, specific years of measured age, yes. By the small, specific structural mechanism that produced my operational understanding of the tournament's bracket, no. The small, specific structural mechanism is the small, specific information I would, on the partnership's small, specific foundational moment, share with you. She held his eyes for a count of 6 breaths. She said, Tell me. He told her. He told her the small, specific account of his original life. He told her the small, specific cultivator he had been in his original life. A small, specific scholar of cultivation history at a small, specific imperial archive who had died at 36 of a small, specific cardiovascular event. He told her the precise, small, specific moment of waking up in the Kade Vorin body 2 days before the tournament. He told her the small, specific knowledge he had of the tournament's bracket from his original life's small, specific scholarly reading of an obscure cultivation tournament historical novel that had, in his original life, been published by a small, specific imperial historian as a small, specific fictional treatment of an actual tournament from approximately 3 centuries earlier. He gave her the small, specific cover story for his knowledge. The cover story was, by his honest reading of the small, specific operational requirements, sufficient. The cover story explained why he knew the bracket's outcomes without requiring him to disclose the precise, small, specific structural mechanism of his return. The cover story produced, on Yin Rava's honest reading, a small, specific operational understanding that was sufficient for the partnership's small, specific foundational moment, without producing the small, specific catastrophic risk of disclosing a small, specific structural mechanism that the Empire's cultivation tradition had never previously documented. She listened. At the end, she said, You are, by the small, specific cover story you have just provided, a cultivator from the Empire's previous generation who has, by a small, specific reincarnation mechanism that has not been documented in the Empire's small, specific cultivation tradition, returned to a 19-year-old body 2 days before a tournament whose outcomes you have read about in a small, specific fictional historical novel that, by the precise small, specific quality of its small, specific historical accuracy, has provided you with the bracket's small, specific operational map. Kate said, Yes. She said, The small, specific cover story is, by my honest professional read, the small, specific cover story I would expect from a cultivator who was, by the precise small, specific structural shape of his small, specific operational understanding, something more substantial than the cover story describes. I will accept the cover story for the partnership's small specific foundational moment. I will not, in any small specific future moment of the partnership's operational development, demand the more substantial explanation. The cover story is, Kade, by my honest professional read, sufficient. Kade said, "Thank you, Yinrava." She said, "The partnership." He said, "Yes." She said, "I accept the small specific personal partnership's small specific structural shape. The shape will, on its precise small specific operational development across the next 20 years, produce, by my honest projection, exactly the small specific operational and personal partnership that you have described. I will, on the partnership's small specific foundational moment, commit my 43 years of small specific commercial capacity to the partnership's structural objectives. I will, on the same moment, also commit my precise small specific personal capacity to whatever small specific personal direction the partnership's interaction produces." She extended her hand across the desk. He took it. The handshake held for a count of 6 breaths. She withdrew. She said, "The tournament's remaining bouts." He said, "The third round tomorrow morning. The quarterfinal Thursday. The semifinal Friday. The final Saturday." She said, "The precise small specific kill plans," he said, "are operationally in place for each of the remaining 4 bouts. The plans were, by my preparation across the past day, completed last night. I have the small specific operational details of each plan in a small specific document I will provide to you tonight. The document will allow you to, on your professional capacity, adjust the smallest syndicate's house odds across the remaining bouts in a manner that maximizes the partnership's small specific commercial outcome across the tournament's remainder." She said, "The document." He took, from the inside pocket of his tunic, the small specific folded list he had been writing across the past 2 days. He unfolded the list. He laid it on the desk. She looked at the list. She studied it for approximately 7 minutes. She said, "The kill plans are, by my honest professional read of each plan's small specific operational mechanics, operationally precise. Each plan has, by my read, an approximately 93% success probability against the small specific targeted opponent. The combined probability across the 4 remaining bouts is, by my calculation, approximately 75%. Kade said, "The probability is acceptable." She said, "The probability is acceptable. The partnership is, by my honest professional read, operationally established. I will, on the small specific operational protocol of the partnership's commercial dimension, take the list with me tonight and produce the small specific copy you will keep tomorrow morning. The copy will be delivered to the lodge at the 5th hour of morning. You will, by the standard small specific operational protocol, destroy the copy after each bout's completion." He said, "Understood." She said, "One further question." He said, "Ask." She said, "The post-tournament objective." He said, "The post-tournament objective is, by my honest reading, to operate, across the next 20 years, as the Empire's most operationally significant independent cultivator. The operation will produce, on its standard small specific reputation effect, the small specific advancement to senior cultivation tiers that the Vorin clan's small specific institutional capacity could not have produced. The advancement will be, by my honest projection, substantially faster than the standard small specific clan-supported cultivation career path." She said, "The operation's small specific commercial dimension." He said, "Will, by the partnership's small specific structural mechanics, be your small specific operational responsibility. You will, on the standard small specific division of partnership responsibilities, run the operation's commercial activities. I will run the operation's cultivation activities. The 2 activities will, on the precise small specific complementary application, produce the small specific operational outcome the partnership has been founded for. She said, the small specific commercial activities. He said, will be, by my honest projection, substantial. The standard small specific tournament winner's commercial portfolio includes, on the Imperial City's small specific commercial pattern, approximately 11 significant small specific commercial opportunities that the winner can, by the small specific commercial pattern, develop across the first 3 years after the tournament. The opportunities are, by my honest reading of the Imperial City's small specific commercial literature, collectively worth, on the standard projection, approximately 300,000 gold imperials of small specific operational capital across the 3 years. The capital will, on the partnership's small specific structural mechanics, be, by your honest professional management, substantially leveraged through the partnership's small specific operational efficiency to a substantially larger small specific commercial position across the same period. She said, 300,000 gold imperials of operational capital. He said, as the small specific starting position. The partnership's small specific projection across 20 years is, by my honest reading, substantially larger. She studied him for a long count. She said, Kade. He said, Yin Rava. She said, you have, at 19 years of small specific apparent age, proposed a small specific commercial personal partnership that is, by every honest professional measure of my 43-year commercial career, the most operationally significant partnership I have ever been offered. He said, thank you. She said, I am, Kade, by every honest internal measure of my own small specific personal accounting at this small specific moment, substantially more interested in the partnership than I would have expected to be at the small specific outset of this evening's conversation. He said, I am pleased. She picked up the list. She folded it. She put it in the briefcase. She turned to the door. She paused. She turned back. She said, one further small specific operational question. He said, ask. She said, the small specific personal dimension of the partnership, the development of which will be, by the partnership's small specific structural mechanics, on whatever small specific direction the precise small specific quality of our continued interaction produces. He said, yes. She said, the direction's small specific operational pacing. He said, will be, by my honest preference, on whatever small specific pacing the precise small specific quality of our continued interaction produces. I will not, Yin Rava, propose any small specific pacing. I will, in whatever small specific moment the small specific direction's structural development reaches its small specific maturation point, accept the small specific maturation. I am, by every honest measure of my preference, content to allow the precise small specific structural development to proceed on whatever pace it produces. She studied him. She said, the small specific maturation point is, by my honest internal accounting at this small specific moment, substantially closer than I would have projected at this evening's small specific outset. He said, understood. She said, I will, on the small specific operational protocol of returning to the syndicate to process the list, return to my office. I will then, by the small specific personal protocol of my own honest internal accounting, return to this lodge at the 10th hour of evening for a small specific personal continuation of this conversation. The continuation will be, by my honest preference, at the precise small specific pace the small specific quality of our continued interaction produces. He said, I will be available at the 10th hour of evening. She said, the 10th hour. She left the chamber. She closed the door. Kade sat at the desk for a long count. He performed the post-bout cultivation cycle through to its standard small specific completion. At the 10th hour of evening, Yin Rava returned. The small specific personal dimension of the partnership reached, by the small specific directions, small specific structural mechanics, a small specific maturation that was, by both their honest internal accountings, the precise small specific pace the evening's continued interaction had produced. The partnership, by midnight of the tournament's second day, was, on every honest measure of its small specific structural completion, established. The work continued. Part 3. The Bracket Falls. Chapter 10. Vrincasso. The third-round bout began at the second hour of morning on the tournament's third day. The opponent was Vrincasso of the Crimson Talon sect, 23 years old. Solid silver tier. The Crimson Talon sect was, by the Empire's cultivation registry, a mid-rank sect with a small specific reputation for producing aggressive close-quarters cultivators. Vrincasso had, by the bracket's first 2 rounds, eliminated 2 opponents through small specific high-pressure combat sequences that the arena's spectators had registered as the bracket's most operationally impressive performances after Kade's 2 consecutive fatalities. The bracket had Vrincasso at 5-3 favored. The bracket had Kade at 5-3 against. By the time the bout began, the smallest syndicate's house odds, adjusted across the previous evening on Yin Rava's small specific operational pattern, had Kade at 3-2 against. The closest the syndicate's line had moved toward Kade across the past 48 hours. Kade entered the ring from the eastern tunnel. Vrincasso entered from the western tunnel. The 2 cultivators bowed to Master Voss. The 2 took their positions. Master Voss raised the signal flag. Master Voss said, "Begin." Vrincasso moved. The move was, by every external measure of bracket expectation, the precise small specific opening that the Crimson Talon sect's small specific aggressive curriculum had been teaching its junior cultivators for approximately 70 years. The opening was a small specific high-pressure rush across the ring at the standard silver tier combat pace, with the small specific intent of forcing the opponent into a small specific defensive posture from which the Crimson Talon's signature close-quarters technique sequence could be applied. The rush carried Vrincasso across the 20 paces between the 2 cultivators in approximately 1.5 seconds. The rush's small specific endpoint was, by the Crimson Talon's standard combat training, a precise small specific position at the ring's center from which Vrincasso would, by the curriculum's standard pattern, initiate the close-quarters sequence. Vrincasso reached the ring's center. Vrincasso initiated the close-quarters sequence. The sequence's first technique was a small specific palm strike at the opponent's chest. The palm strike's small specific projection vector was, by the Crimson Talon's standard combat pattern, a small specific straight-line strike from the cultivator's lead shoulder, with the small specific mid-silver tier mana projection. Kade had, by his small specific preparation, the precise small specific knowledge of the palm strike structural mechanics. The novel's Chapter 61 had documented the Crimson Talon's signature close-quarters sequence in a small specific scene in which the protagonist's eventual second-in-command had, by his outer sect training, analyzed the sequence's small specific structural pattern. The analysis had identified the sequence's small specific vulnerability. The vulnerability was, the palm strike's small specific projection vector required the cultivator to commit, for a precise small specific moment of approximately 1/2 second, the cultivator's small specific lead shoulder mana channel focus to the strike's projection. The commitment was, by the sequence's structural mechanics, a small specific operational requirement that the sequence's effectiveness depended on. The commitment, however, also produced a small specific structural exposure at the cultivator's small specific opposite side mana cluster. The small specific cluster located at the cultivator's lower right kidney area, which was, by the body's standard mana channel anatomy, the small specific cluster that maintained the cultivator's standing balance during the small specific lead shoulder commitment. The exposure was, by the novel's small specific reference, The precise small specific vulnerability that a small specific iron needle projection at the lower right kidney area would, on its small specific contact, produce a small specific cascading mana-channel disruption. Kade, at the precise small specific moment of Vrenkaso's palm strike commitment, projected the iron needle. The projection traveled the small specific distance of approximately 3 paces from Kade's index finger to Vrenkaso's lower right kidney area. The contact landed Vrenkaso's mana-channel network across approximately 2 seconds, cascaded into the small specific structural failure that the iron needle's small specific contact produced. In the same 2 seconds, Vrenkaso's small specific lead shoulder commitment, which had been the small specific operational anchor of the palm strike's projection, became, by the cascading mana-channel disruption, operationally unavailable. Vrenkaso's body, by the small specific structural failure of the small specific operational anchor, lost the precise small specific balance required for the palm strike's standard combat completion. Vrenkaso's body collapsed forward. The collapse's small specific trajectory carried Vrenkaso's body into the precise small specific position that Kade, by his small specific lateral movement at the moment of the iron needle's projection, had vacated. The vacated position was, by Kade's careful study of the ring's geometry, the precise small specific position at the ring's eastern edge where, by the arena's 400-year-old construction, a small specific second drainage grate was set into the sand floor. The second grate was, by the same construction, covered by approximately 3 centimeters of raked sand. Vrenkaso's body, in the collapse's forward trajectory, landed on the second grate. The grate's small specific structural failure, by the arena's same 400 years of slow corrosion, produced the same small specific collapse that the previous day's grate had produced under Hesrin's foot. Vrenkaso's body, in the collapse's continued motion, was caught at the precise small specific moment of the grate's secondary collapse by the small specific structural mechanics of the body's mid-combat momentum. The combined small specific kinetics of the cascading mana-channel disruption, the forward collapse, the body's mid-combat momentum, and the grate's secondary collapse produced, at the precise small specific landing position of Vrenkaso's left temple against the grate's exposed iron lip, a small specific cranial fracture. The fracture's small specific severity was, by every external measure, fatal. Vrenkaso lost consciousness immediately. The arena's medical response team arrived in approximately 12 seconds. The resuscitation attempt across the next 4 minutes failed. Vrenkaso was pronounced dead at the 8th minute of the bout. The arena's spectators, by the small specific quality of having now observed 3 consecutive bracket-defining fatal accidents, did not, on the third fatality, register the precise, small specific moment of stunned silence that had followed the previous 2. The spectators registered, instead, a small specific quietness. The quietness was, by every external measure of tournament observation history, the small specific quietness of a crowd that had, across 3 consecutive mornings, watched a single cultivator produce 3 consecutive fatal outcomes against 3 consecutive favored opponents in 3 consecutive bracket bouts. The quietness was, by every external measure, the small specific quietness of a crowd that had registered, on the third fatality, that the small specific pattern was no longer a small specific pattern of accidents. The quietness was the small specific quietness of a crowd that had begun to be afraid. Master Voss, at the ring's central position, looked at Kade across the ring. Master Voss did not, in the count of breaths, speak. Master Voss inclined his head. Master Voss said, "The round is awarded. Kade Vorin advances to the quarter-final." Kade bowed to Master Voss. He bowed in the direction of Vrenkaso's body. He walked off the ring through the eastern tunnel. The arena's spectators, in the small specific moment of his exit, did not, by every external measure of tournament observation history, produce any small specific cheering or applause. The arena's spectators were silent. By the third round's conclusion at the day's end, the smallest syndicate's house odds on Kade to win the tournament had moved from 96-1 to 11-1. The bracket had, by the third round's small specific outcome, registered Kade Vorin as the small specific tournament event the bracket had not, in its 400 years of operation, previously registered. The event was, a cultivator at mid-bronze tier was, by some small specific operational mechanism that the bracket's standard observation pattern could not identify, killing the tournament's favored opponents at a rate of 1 per round. The cultivator was, by every honest external measure, the small specific outlier the bracket had never produced before. The cultivator had, by the day's end, entered the quarter-final. Chapter 11. Sarah Lynn. Sarah Lynn came to the lodge at the 7th hour of evening. She came under the small specific protocol of a senior diplomatic visit. She arrived in the small specific carriage of the Imperial Cultivation Academy's diplomatic office, escorted by 2 academy attendants, with the small specific identification papers of a formal academy observer. She was, by every external measure, 26 years old. She was, by the Academy's small specific records, the Academy's chief observation officer for the present tournament, a rank she had, by the Academy's small specific promotion records, held for the past 4 years. She was, by the Academy's small specific reputation network, the senior observation officer Master Show had, by the novel's small specific reference in Chapter 72, sent in his place to the present tournament. Master Show himself was not, by the Academy's small specific roster, attending the tournament. Sarah Lynn was attending in his place. The Vorin clan's tournament chamberlain announced her at the lodge's reception. Kade came to the reception. He bowed precisely. She bowed precisely. She said, Vorin Kade. He said, Observation Officer Sarah. She said, I would like, with your permission, to request a small specific private conversation. The conversation is, by my own honest description, on a matter of small specific academy interest. He said, Granted. The chamber I will receive you in is the lodge's western reception chamber. The reception chamber's privacy is, by the lodge's standard small specific reception protocol, sufficient for an academy observation conversation. She inclined her head. They walked to the western reception chamber. The chamber was, by the lodge's standard configuration, a small specific room with 2 facing chairs, a small table between them, and a small specific tea service that the lodge's chamberlain had prepositioned on the table. The 2 attendants who had arrived with her remained at the chamber's door. She sat in the eastern chair. He sat in the western chair. He poured tea for both of them. She accepted her cup. She said, the 3rd round. He said, the 3rd round. She said, Vrin Casso of the Crimson Talon sect. Vrin Casso. The fatality. The fatality. She studied him across the table. She said, Vorin Kade. I am here on Academy business. The Academy's observation protocol requires me to formally assess the bracket's small specific operational events for the Academy's small specific recruitment recommendation pipeline. The pipeline produces, by the Academy's standard annual procedure, approximately 3 to 7 recruitment recommendations for each year's tournament. The recommendations are, by the Academy's standard administrative procedure, produced from the Academy's small specific observation officer's small specific direct assessment of each tournament's small specific operational events. He said, Understood. She said, The small specific operational events of the present tournament's first 3 rounds are, by every measure of my 4-year observation history, unprecedented. He said, By which measure? She said, By the measure that the present tournament has produced, across 3 consecutive rounds, 3 consecutive fatal outcomes against 3 consecutive favored opponents, all attributable to the small specific operational behavior of a single cultivator. He said, The cultivator being me. She said, the cultivator being you. She was quiet for a count. She said, the Academy's small specific observation officer has, by the protocol's small specific requirement, a small specific personal interview with each tournament's small specific anomalous performer. The interview's small specific purpose is to assess the anomalous performer's small specific personal qualities against the Academy's small specific recruitment criteria. The interview's small specific result is, by the protocol's standard mechanics, a small specific recommendation document that the Academy's senior administration reviews for the small specific recruitment decision. The interview is, by every measure of the protocol's small specific history, the precise small specific moment that determines whether an anomalous tournament performer receives a small specific Academy recruitment offer. He said, I am being interviewed. She said, you are being interviewed. He sat with the small specific statement for account. He said, the small specific recruitment criteria. She said, the small specific recruitment criteria are, by the Academy's standard internal documentation, for. The first is the small specific cultivator's small specific tier and combat capability. The second is the small specific cultivator's small specific tactical understanding of cultivation combat. The third is the small specific cultivator's small specific personal character. The fourth is the small specific cultivator's small specific operational compatibility with the Academy's small specific institutional culture. He said, the 4 criteria. She said, the first criterion, by your bracket profile, is mid-bronze tier, which is, by the Academy's standard recruitment threshold, substantially below the Academy's normal small specific recruitment minimum. The second criterion, by your 3 consecutive bouts, is, by my honest professional assessment, substantially above any small specific tactical understanding the Academy has documented in its 40 years of observation records. The third criterion is what this small specific personal interview is intended to assess. The fourth criterion is what this small specific personal interview is also intended to assess. He said, the third and fourth criteria are what you are assessing. She said, they are. She was quiet for a count. She said, Vorin Kade, I am going to ask you a small specific question that, by the protocol's standard pattern, is the small specific question that the protocol's standard pattern uses to assess the third criterion. The question is, do you consider, by your own small specific personal accounting, the small specific deaths of Hess Rin, Han Rui, and Vrin Kaso to have been, by your own honest internal reading, operationally justified outcomes? He looked at her. He said, yes. She studied him. She said, you are not, by the small specific quietness of your one-word answer, proposing any small specific justification narrative that the protocol's small specific assessment criteria are designed to evaluate. He said, I am not. The justification narrative would be, by my honest reading, a small specific operational concealment of the small specific structural fact that the deaths were the small specific consequence of my small specific deliberate operational strategy. The strategy was, I needed to win the bouts. The bouts opponents would, on the bracket standard pattern, have advanced past me if I had not eliminated them. The elimination was, by my honest internal reading, the small specific operationally optimal action available to me. I executed the small specific operationally optimal action. The deaths were, by my honest accounting, the precise small specific outcome the action produced. I would, on every honest measure of repeat opportunity, execute the same small specific operational action again. She studied him for a long count. She said, the small specific justification narrative is, by my 4-year observation history, the precise small specific narrative that approximately 98% of the Academy's interview subjects produce when asked the small specific question I have just asked you. He said, I am not them. She said, "You are not them." She was quiet for a long count. She said, "The fourth criterion. The small specific operational compatibility with the Academy's small specific institutional culture." He said, "The institutional culture." She said, "The institutional culture is, by the Academy's small specific documented history across 2 centuries. A small specific culture that values the small specific cultivator's small specific operational efficiency above all other small specific qualities. The culture's standard small specific assessment criteria are small specific outcome focus, small specific resource optimization, small specific institutional restraint, where institutional restraint produces operational efficiency, and small specific institutional aggression, where institutional aggression produces operational efficiency. The culture's small specific operational pattern is, by the Academy's documented history, to produce, across 2 centuries, the Empire's most operationally efficient cultivators. The culture's small specific personality is, by every honest external measure, cold. He said, "Cold." She said, "Cold." She held his eyes across the table. She said, "Vorin Kade. By the small specific 4-criterion assessment I have just conducted across the past 11 minutes, the assessment that the Academy's small specific protocol requires me to produce in writing for the Academy's senior administration, you are, by every honest measure I can apply, the most institutionally compatible interview subject I have encountered in 4 years." He said, "Thank you." She said, "The Academy's small specific recruitment offer." He said, "Is." She said, "Is, by my own honest professional authority as the Academy's Chief Observation Officer for the present tournament, hereby formally extended. The offer is for the small specific position of Academy Direct Disciple, which is the Academy's most senior small specific junior position. The position carries, by the Academy's standard small specific direct disciple compensation, a small specific annual stipend of 5,000 gold imperials, full small specific Academy training access, and small specific direct mentorship from one of the Academy's senior cultivators. The mentorship will be, by my own honest professional preference, myself, on the condition that you accept the offer." Kade studied her. He said, "The small specific mentorship arrangement." She said, "The small specific mentorship arrangement is, by the Academy's standard direct disciple protocol, a small specific personal and operational arrangement that, across the disciple's typical small specific 4-year training period, develops into the small specific quality of an extended professional partnership. The partnership's small specific operational dimension is, by the Academy's standard pattern, a small specific extension of the Academy's small specific institutional operations. The partnership's small specific personal dimension is, by the Academy's standard pattern, whatever the precise small specific quality of the disciple and the mentor's continued interaction produces." Kade looked at her. He said, "Observation Officer Sarah." She said, "Vorin Kade." He said, "I am, by the structural completion of last evening's small specific personal partnership with Yen Rava of the Yen Rava Goods and Trade, in a small specific personal partnership whose small specific structural mechanics include the small specific possibility of partnership expansion to additional small specific persons under the small specific condition of full and transparent disclosure to existing partners. The condition is, by the small specific original partnership's small specific founding agreement, non-negotiable. Any small specific expansion of the partnership to additional persons requires the new partner's commitment to the same small specific condition of full and transparent disclosure." She held his eyes across the table. She said, "You are disclosing the small specific existing partnership in the precise small specific moment that I am extending the small specific mentorship offer." He said, "I am." She said, "The disclosure's small specific operational logic." He said, is that the small specific mentorship offers standard pattern of personal development would, by the offers small specific structural mechanics, eventually require the disclosure. I am, by the small specific original partnerships condition, required to make the disclosure at the small specific earliest available moment. The earliest available moment is, by the precise small specific quality of the offer's small specific structural mechanics. This small specific moment. She studied him. She said, the small specific original partnership's existence does not, by my own honest internal assessment, change the small specific mentorship offers structural terms. He said, understood. She said, the small specific original partnership's existence does, by my own honest internal assessment, change the small specific mentorship offers small specific personal dimensions standard structural pattern. He said, how? She said, the standard structural pattern would have been, by the Academy's small specific mentorship protocol, a small specific exclusive personal arrangement between mentor and disciple. The arrangement would, on the protocol's standard mechanics, develop across the 4-year training period into a small specific exclusive professional partnership that excluded other small specific partnerships. The small specific original partnership's existence requires the small specific revision of this structural pattern to a non-exclusive arrangement. The non-exclusive arrangement would, by every honest measure, be a small specific structural revision of the protocol's standard mechanics. He said, the revision, she said, is, by my own honest internal assessment at this small specific moment, acceptable. He held her eyes. He said, you are accepting the revision. She said, I am accepting the revision. The acceptance is, by my own honest internal accounting, predicated on 3 small specific conditions. The first is that the existing partner, Yen Rava, be informed of the small specific revision before the revision's structural integration into our small specific arrangement. The second is that the existing partner consent to the revision under the existing partnership's small specific founding agreement. The third is that, on the existing partner's consent, the revision proceed by the same small specific pacing protocol that the existing partnership's small specific personal dimension was developed under. That is to say, on whatever small specific pacing the precise small specific quality of our continued interaction produces. He said, the 3 conditions are accepted on my side. She said, the Academy's small specific direct disciple offer is formally extended. The offer's acceptance is, by your acceptance of the 4-criterion assessment and the 3 small specific conditions of the small specific personal dimension revision, hereby formally received by the Academy. The mentorship arrangement begins, by the Academy's standard small specific procedural mechanics, at the conclusion of the present tournament. The annual stipend will be paid, by the Academy's standard small specific fiscal mechanics, beginning the first day of the calendar month following the tournament's conclusion. He said, accepted. She extended her hand across the table. He took it. The handshake held for a count of 3 breaths. She withdrew. She said, the disclosure to the existing partner. He said, will be made tonight at the lodge. The existing partner will, by the small specific original partnership's operational protocol, attend the lodge at the 10th hour of evening for the standard small specific partnership briefing. The disclosure will be made at the briefing. The existing partner's consent will be, by my honest projection of the existing partner's small specific personal disposition, received. She said, the existing partner's consent. The small specific projection. He said, the small specific projection is based on the existing partner's small specific founding agreement framework, which the existing partner constructed with full knowledge that the small specific personal partnership's small specific structural mechanics would, by their precise small specific operational nature, produce the small specific possibility of partnership expansion. The existing partner's framework was, by my honest read of last evening's conversation, built on the explicit acknowledgement of this possibility. She said, understood. She stood from the chair. She said, I will, by the Academy's small specific protocol, return to the Academy's diplomatic office for the night. I will, by the small specific personal dimension revisions pacing protocol, await the existing partner's consent before any small specific further continuation of the personal dimension's development. He said, understood. She said, Vorin Kade. He said, Observation Officer Sarah. She said, the quarterfinal tomorrow morning. He said, the quarterfinal. She said, the bracket's quarterfinal opponent is Ruin Hask of the Stone Mountain sect. The bracket has Ruin Hask at 3-1 favored. The smallest syndicate's house line, on this evening's adjusted odds, has Ruin Hask at 11-8 favored. He said, the bracket's projection is, by my honest reading, the bracket's last small specific projection in which I will be the small specific bracket underdog. The semifinal and the final will, by the smallest syndicate's projected house adjustments, have me at progressively shorter odds. She said, the quarterfinal. He said, the kill plan is operationally in place. The plan's small specific structural mechanics are based on Ruin Hask's small specific signature defensive posture, which the Stone Mountain sect has trained its small specific senior cultivators in for the past 4 decades. The posture's small specific vulnerability is, by my honest reading, exactly the small specific vulnerability that the Vorin clan's signature Iron Mountain override technique was historically developed to exploit. The override was developed approximately 120 years ago, in the small specific period of the Empire's last major cultivation sect war, as the precise small specific anti-Stone Mountain countermeasure. The override is, by the Vorin clan's small specific training history, a technique that the clan's current generation of junior cultivators has not been taught, because the Stone Mountain sect has not, across the past 100 years, engaged in any operational hostilities with the Vorin clan. The override's small specific training is, by the clan's small specific curriculum, a senior cultivator's technique. She said, you do not have the override's training. He said, I do not. I have, however, a small specific written record of the override's small specific operational mechanics, which I have, across the past day, reviewed in detail. The review has been sufficient for the small specific kill plan. The plan does not require the override's full operational execution. The plan requires only the override's small specific opening sequence, which is, by the technique's documented small specific structural mechanics, operationally compatible with the Iron Needle projection's small specific operational mechanics. The Iron Needle, applied at the precise small specific moment that the Stone Mountain's signature defensive posture's small specific vulnerability becomes operational, produces, by my honest projection, the same small specific cascading mana channel disruption that the previous 3 bouts produced. She studied him for a long count. She said, the small specific written record of the override's mechanics. He said, is in a small specific document I have, by the precise small specific quality of last evening's partnership briefing with the existing partner, delivered to her this morning for transcription. The transcription will, on the existing partner's standard small specific commercial protocol, be filed in the small specific archive that the existing partner maintains for the partnership's small specific operational records. The archive's small specific access is, by the partnership's founding agreement protocol, fully transparent to all small specific partnership members under the founding agreement's full disclosure condition. You will, on the small specific revision's structural integration into the partnership, have full access to the small specific archive. She said, understood. She walked to the chamber's door. She paused. She turned. She said, Kade. He said, Sarah. She said, The small specific quality of this conversation has been, by my own honest internal accounting at this small specific moment, substantially more operationally significant than I had projected at the conversation's small specific outset. He said, I had also projected the conversation as substantially less operationally significant at the outset. She said, the small specific maturation point. He said, will, by the small specific personal dimension revisions pacing protocol, develop on whatever pace the existing partner's consent permits. She said, understood. She left the chamber. She walked, with her 2 attendants, to the lodge's reception. She entered her carriage. The carriage departed. Kade walked back to his chamber. At the 10th hour of evening, Yin Ravo arrived. He briefed her on the day's bout. He briefed her on the Academy's recruitment offer. He briefed her on Sarah Lynn's 3 conditions. Yin Rava listened. Yin Rava said, the small specific revision is consistent with the partnership's small specific founding agreement framework. He said, it is. Yin Rava said, I consent to the small specific revision. He said, thank you. Yin Rava said, the small specific personal dimension revision's small specific structural development will, by the same small specific pacing protocol, proceed on whatever pace the precise, small specific quality of the partnership's continued interaction produces. He said, understood. Yin Rava said, the quarterfinal. He said, the quarterfinal. They worked on the quarterfinal's small specific kill plan refinements through to the 2nd hour of morning. He slept. He had, by his quiet calculation at the 2nd hour of morning, approximately 7 hours before the quarterfinal. Chapter 12. The quarterfinal through the final. The quarterfinal bout against Rin Hask of the Stone Mountain sect lasted approximately 4 seconds. Kade's opening, by the small specific kill plan's preparation, used the iron needle projection at the precise small specific position of Rin Hask's small specific defensive posture vulnerability. The override's small specific opening sequence's small specific compatibility with the iron needle's mechanics produced, on the contact, the precise small specific cascading mana channel disruption that the previous 3 bouts had produced. The disruption produced, by Rin Hask's small specific combat positioning, a small specific structural failure of his cardiac mana support across approximately 3 seconds. Rin Hask collapsed at the ring's center. The medical response team's resuscitation attempt failed. Rin Hask was pronounced dead at the 11th minute of the bout. The arena's spectators, by the small specific quality of having now observed 4 consecutive bracket-defining fatal accidents across 4 consecutive mornings, were silent. The silence was, by every external measure of tournament observation history, the precise small specific silence that the 3rd round had begun to produce, intensified by the small specific quality of the 4th consecutive instance. The smallest syndicate's house odds, by the day's end, had Kade at 5-3 favored to win the tournament. The semifinal bout against Han Rui of the Crimson Talon sect on Friday morning was the first bout in which Kade's opponent was, by the bracket's standard small specific pre-bout intelligence, substantially informed about Kade's small specific operational patterns. Han Rui was 26. Solid silver tier. The Crimson Talon sect's senior tournament representative. Han Rui was, by his small specific pre-bout preparation, the first opponent of the tournament who had explicitly chosen a small specific opening that did not match the bracket standard small specific defensive or aggressive patterns. Han Rui's small specific opening was a small specific defensive retreat to the ring's western edge, with a small specific aura projection that maintained the cultivator's full mana channel cluster integrity across the precise, small specific spatial radius of approximately 5 paces from his position. The opening was, by every external measure, operationally designed to prevent the iron needle projection's small specific contact at any of the 4 mana cluster positions that the previous 4 bouts had exploited. The opening was, by Kade's small specific honest assessment, operationally competent. Kade had, by his small specific preparation across the previous evening, anticipated the small specific opening. The kill plan's small specific mechanics required a different approach. The different approach was the Iron Needle projection's small specific double strike sequence, which the Vorin clan's small specific historical curriculum had documented as the small specific tactical extension of the standard Iron Needle for use against opponents who had, by their small specific operational competence, developed defensive postures against the standard single-strike Iron Needle. The double strike sequence required the small specific cultivator to project a small specific first Iron Needle at a small specific decoy target position, followed by a small specific second Iron Needle at the actual target position. The second Iron Needle's small specific projection was, by the sequence's mechanics, timed to occur during the precise small specific moment of the opponent's defensive aura's small specific recalibration in response to the first Iron Needle. The recalibration window was, by the sequence's small specific timing requirements, approximately 1/2 second. The window was, by the sequence's standard small specific historical use, a sufficient operational window for the second Iron Needle's small specific kill projection. Kade executed the sequence. The first Iron Needle's small specific decoy target was Han Rui's lead shoulder. Han Rui's defensive aura recalibrated, by his small specific operational competence, to neutralize the small specific decoy projection. The recalibration window opened. Kade projected the second Iron Needle at Han Rui's lower abdominal mana cluster. The second Iron Needle's small specific projection landed inside the small specific recalibration window. Han Rui's cardiac mana support's small specific structural failure occurred at approximately 3 seconds after the second Iron Needle's contact. Han Rui collapsed at the ring's western edge. The medical response team's resuscitation attempt failed. Han Rui was pronounced dead at the 14th minute of the bout. The arena's spectators were silent. The smallest syndicate's house odds, by the day's end, had Kade at the precise small specific position of 2-1 favored to win the final. The final bout on Saturday morning was against Vren Tash of the Iron Pine sect, the same sect Han Rui had belonged to, the only Iron Pine senior representative still in the bracket, and the small specific senior cultivator the Iron Pine sect had, by their small specific pre-bout preparation, designated as the bout's small specific operationally optimal response to Kade's small specific operational patterns. Vren Tash was 31. He was at high silver tier. He was, by the Empire's small specific cultivation registry, the third-ranked silver tier cultivator in the Imperial City. Vren Tash's pre-bout small specific preparation had been, by the Iron Pine sect's small specific intelligence gathering across the previous 5 days, the most operationally informed pre-bout preparation any of Kade's opponents had conducted. Vren Tash had, by Yen Rava's quiet intelligence from the Syndicate's network, spent the previous evening reviewing the precise, small specific details of the previous 5 bouts, including the small specific Iron Needle projections, small specific operational mechanics, the small specific double strike sequences, small specific timing requirements, and the small specific cardiac mana supports, small specific failure threshold under the small specific cascading disruption. Vren Tash had, by Yen Rava's intelligence, also acquired, through a small specific Iron Pine sect commercial agent, a small specific protective talisman that had been engineered specifically to protect a small specific senior cultivator's mana channel network from small specific cascading disruptions of the precise small specific category that Kade's previous 5 bouts had produced. The talisman was, by Yen Rava's small specific assessment, operationally effective. The talisman's small specific effectiveness, however, had, by Yen Rava's small specific commercial network research, a small specific operational limitation. The limitation was that the talisman's protection had a small specific saturation threshold of approximately 3 small specific cascading disruption events within a small specific 6-second window. The fourth small specific disruption within the same window would exceed the talisman's saturation capacity. The talisman would, on the fourth small specific disruption, fail. The Vorin clan's small specific historical archive, which Yen Rava had, by Kade's small specific direction across the previous evening, accessed through a small specific senior elder contact in the Vorin clan's archive office, had documented one small specific Iron Needle projection variant that the clan's small specific historical curriculum had never publicly used. The variant was the Iron Needle Storm, which projected 4 small specific iron needles simultaneously at 4 small specific target positions across the opponent's mana cluster anatomy. The storm had not, by the clan's small specific historical records, been used in any small specific public bout because the technique's small specific operational complexity required the cultivator's full mana channel commitment for approximately 6 seconds, a small specific commitment that, in any small specific standard tournament bout, would leave the cultivator operationally vulnerable to any small specific counterattack across the 6-second commitment window. The storm's small specific operational application required, by the technique's small specific structural mechanics, a small specific tactical situation in which the cultivator's 6-second vulnerability would be operationally acceptable. The final bout against Vren Tash, on Kade's honest internal assessment, was exactly that situation. Kade had, by the previous evening's small specific preparation with Yen Rava, committed to the storm's small specific use. The bout began at the 2nd hour of morning on Saturday. The bout was held in front of approximately 70,000 spectators, the largest tournament audience in the Imperial Arena's 400-year history. The audience included the Imperial City's senior nobility, the Empire's small specific cultivation house representatives, the Academy's senior administration including Master Sho who had, on Sarah Lin's small specific recommendation, personally attended the final, and a small specific delegation from the Imperial Palace itself. Vren Tash entered the ring from the western tunnel. Kade entered from the eastern tunnel. The two bowed to Master Voss. Master Voss raised the signal flag. Master Voss said, "Begin." Kade did not, on the bout's opening, perform any small specific opening exchange. He committed, in the bout's first second, to the Iron Needle Storm. The storm's small specific mana channel commitment was, by every external measure, visible across the arena. Kade's small specific cultivation foundation projected, in the second of the bout, the small specific full channel commitment that the storm's small specific structural mechanics required. The projection was, by the small specific quality of its visible manifestation, the precise small specific full mana channel commitment that the Vorin clan's small specific historical curriculum had documented as the storm's small specific operational requirement. The storm's small specific operational projection initiated in the 4th second. 4 small specific iron needles projected simultaneously at 4 small specific target positions across Vren Tash's mana cluster anatomy. The 4 small specific projections landed across approximately 1/2 second. Vren Tash's talisman activated. The talisman's small specific cascading disruption protection absorbed the first 3 projections' small specific cascading disruption events. The talisman, by its small specific saturation threshold, absorbed all 3 within the first second of the storm's small specific operational projection. The 4th small specific iron needle's small specific cascading disruption event arrived in the same second. The talisman's saturation capacity, by the 4th event's small specific arrival, was exceeded. The talisman failed. The 4th small specific iron needle's small specific cascading disruption propagated through Vrentash's mana-channel network across approximately 3 seconds. Vrentash's cardiac mana support failed at approximately 4 seconds after the storm's initiation. Vrentash collapsed at the ring's western edge. The medical response team's resuscitation attempt across the next 12 minutes failed. Vrentash was pronounced dead at the 15th minute of the bout. The arena's 70,000 spectators were silent. Master Voss looked at Kade across the ring. Master Voss inclined his head. Master Voss said, "The round is awarded. The tournament's champion is Vorin Kade." Kade bowed to Master Voss. He bowed in the direction of Vrentash's body. He walked off the ring through the eastern tunnel. The arena's 70,000 spectators, in the small specific moment of his exit, did not produce any small specific cheering or applause. The arena's 70,000 spectators were silent. The smallest syndicate's house ledger, by the bout's official completion, was, by Yen Rava's small specific calculations, payable to Kade Vorin in the small specific amount of 10,000 gold imperials, the syndicate's standard small specific cap on a single bet. The Empire's small specific tournament reputation network, by the bout's official completion, registered Kade Vorin as the Empire's most operationally significant new small specific cultivator across the past 2 decades. The tournament had, by Saturday's final bout, concluded. The small specific winner had, by his 5 consecutive small specific tournament legal fatalities across 5 consecutive small specific tournament favored opponents, produced the small specific tournament reputation effect that the Empire's small specific tournament history had not, in 400 years of operation, previously produced. The reputation effect's small specific name, by the Imperial City's small specific newspaper reporting that would emerge over the next 24 hours, would be the small specific quietness of the Vorin Kade arena. The phrase would, across the next 20 years of the Empire's small specific cultivation political history, be the precise small specific phrase by which the Empire's small specific cultivation network referred to the small specific operational consequence of Vorin Kade's small specific personal arrival. Part 4. After the Bracket. Chapter 13. The Saturday Morning. Saturday morning's small specific schedule was, by the tournament's small specific protocol, the small specific procedural close of the tournament's 6-day operational arc. The morning's protocol was the closing ceremony at the 8th hour of morning, the small specific reception for the tournament's small specific senior observers, and the small specific tournament champion at the 10th hour of morning, the small specific recruitment offer presentation by the Academy's senior administration at the 11th hour of morning, and the small specific tournament champion's small specific official portrait commission at noon. Kade attended all 4 small specific events. The closing ceremony was, by every measure of the small specific protocol, the precise small specific muted ceremony that the Imperial Arena's senior administration had, on the small specific operational reading of Saturday's bout, designed across the previous evening. The administrative office had, by the small specific reputation effect protocol, calibrated the ceremony's small specific tone to acknowledge Kade's small specific tournament champion status without producing any small specific public celebration that would, on the small specific reputation effect, further amplify the small specific quietness of the Vorin Kade arena. The small specific quietness had been, by the administrative office's small specific projection, already the Empire's small specific, most operationally impactful tournament reputation effect of the past century. Any small specific further amplification would, by the administrative office's small specific projection, produce a small specific reputation effect that exceeded the administrative office's small specific operational capacity to manage. Kade understood the small specific calibration. He accepted the small specific muted ceremony's small specific protocols. He bowed to Master Voss, to the Imperial Palace's small specific delegation, to the senior cultivation observers, and to the small specific 70,000 spectator imperial audience. The audience, in the small specific moment of his bow, was silent. The reception at the 10th hour was attended by approximately 140 senior cultivation observers, including representatives from each of the Empire's 16 senior cultivation houses, the Academy's senior administration, the Imperial Palace's delegation, and a small specific quiet contingent of 3 commercial syndicate representatives that included Yen Rava. Kade was, by the small specific reception's standard small specific format, required to receive each senior observer's small specific personal greeting in sequence across approximately 2 hours. The greetings were, by every external measure, small specific careful. The senior cultivation observer's small specific operational instinct after the 5-bout small specific tournament had, across the previous evening, settled into a small specific consensus that Vorin Kade was the Empire's small specific, most operationally significant new small specific cultivator across the past 2 decades, and that any small specific reception greeting that produced even a small specific perception of small specific operational hostility to Kade would, on the small specific reputation effect, produce immediate small specific commercial and political consequences for the greeter's small specific institutional affiliation. The greetings were, on this reading, uniformly small specific polite. Several of the greetings were, by the small specific quality of the senior observer's small specific personal disposition, small specific warmer than the standard small specific polite. One of the small specific warmer greetings came from the Imperial Palace's delegation. The delegation's small specific senior representative was a young woman of approximately 25 years. She was, by every visible measure, the Imperial Palace's small specific princess of the 3rd rank, 3rd daughter of the Empire's small specific reigning emperor, and the small specific cultivation-affiliated member of the Imperial family's small specific public roster. Her name was Princess Ren Liang. She greeted Kade at the small specific position in the reception line that the Imperial Palace's protocol had assigned to her. She said, "Vorin Kade." He said, "Princess Ren." She studied him. She said, "The tournament's 5 bouts." He said, "The 5 bouts." She said, "The Imperial Palace's small specific reading of the small specific reputation effect produced by the 5 bouts has, by the Palace's small specific operational protocol across the past 3 days, concluded that the small specific most operationally significant new small specific cultivator of the past 2 decades has emerged. The Palace has, across the past 3 days, also concluded that the small specific reputation effect's small specific operational management will, by the Empire's small specific cultivation political pattern, require the Empire's small specific senior institutional engagement of the new cultivator within the small specific operational window of the next 4 years. He said, "The 4-year window." She said, "The 4-year window is, by the Empire's small specific cultivation political pattern, the small specific window within which a small specific tournament champion's small specific operational trajectory is, by the standard pattern, captured by one of the Empire's small specific senior institutional engagement structures. The capture is, by the standard pattern, the small specific structural mechanism by which the Empire's small specific senior institutional network integrates new small specific cultivators of significant operational capacity into the Empire's standard small specific cultivation political architecture." He said, "The standard small specific structural mechanism." She said, "The standard small specific structural mechanisms small specific senior institutional engagement structures are, by the Empire's small specific cultivation political pattern, 3. The first is the Academy's small specific direct disciple program. The second is one of the Empire's small specific senior cultivation house engagements. The third is the Imperial Palace's small specific imperial cultivation engagement, which is, by the Empire's small specific cultivation political history, the small specific senior most institutional engagement available. He said, the Imperial Cultivation Engagement. She said, the Imperial Cultivation Engagement is, by the Empire's small specific cultivation political history, a small specific personal engagement between the small specific tournament champion and a small specific member of the Imperial family. The engagement's small specific structural mechanics are, by the engagement's small specific historical pattern, a small specific extended operational and personal partnership between the small specific tournament champion and the small specific Imperial family member, with the small specific institutional support of the Imperial Palace's full small specific cultivation political and commercial network. He said, the small specific Imperial family member. She said, the small specific Imperial family member would be, by the Empire's small specific historical pattern, the Imperial family's small specific cultivation-affiliated member who, at the small specific moment of the small specific tournament champion's emergence, is operationally positioned to extend the small specific personal engagement offer. He said, you. She said, me. She held his eyes across the reception line. She said, the small specific Imperial Cultivation Engagement's small specific offer is, by the Empire's small specific cultivation political protocol, formally extended at the precise small specific reception greeting that the Imperial Palace's small specific delegate to the tournament reception conducts with the small specific tournament champion. The greeting is, by the protocol's small specific structural mechanics, this small specific present greeting. The offer is, by the same protocol, hereby formally extended. He sat with the small specific offer for a count of breaths. He said, Princess Rin. She said, Vorin Kade. He said, the small specific Imperial Cultivation Engagement's small specific structural mechanics include, by the Empire's small specific historical pattern, a small specific exclusive partnership between the small specific tournament champion and the small specific Imperial family member. The exclusivity is, by every measure of the Empire's small specific cultivation political history, a small specific structural requirement of the small specific engagement's standard pattern. She said, the exclusivity is, by the Empire's small specific cultivation political history, the standard pattern. The standard pattern is, however, by the precise small specific structural quality of the Empire's small specific cultivation political protocol, not small specific operationally, a small specific non-negotiable feature of the small specific engagement. The engagement's small specific structural mechanics permit, by the protocol's small specific historical precedent of 3 previous engagements across approximately 200 years, a small specific non-exclusive arrangement on the small specific consent of all small specific affected parties. He said, the small specific historical precedent. She said, has, by the Empire's small specific cultivation political history, produced the precise small specific, most operationally efficient small specific institutional engagements the Empire has documented across the past 2 centuries. The non-exclusive arrangement has been, by the Imperial Palace's small specific operational records, the small specific structural pattern that produced the Empire's small specific, most operationally significant cultivator political partnerships. He said, the small specific consent of all small specific affected parties. She said, is, by my own honest internal assessment at this small specific moment, operationally available, on my reading, on the small specific condition of my prior small specific disclosure to the Imperial family of the small specific existing arrangements I have, by the Imperial Palace's pre-reception small specific intelligence briefing, been informed that you have. The disclosure has been, by the Palace's small specific protocol, already conducted across the past 48 hours. The imperial family's small specific consent to the non-exclusive arrangement is, by my own honest internal accounting, provisionally obtained on the small specific condition of the small specific affected parties' small specific consent to the arrangement's small specific structural integration. He said, the small specific affected parties' consent, she said, will require the small specific consent of Yin Rava of the Yin Rava Goods and Trade and the small specific consent of Observation Officer Sarah Lin of the Imperial Cultivation Academy. Both small specific parties have been, by the Imperial Palace's small specific protocol, pre-briefed on the small specific pending offer over the past 48 hours. Both small specific parties have, by the Palace's small specific intelligence return at the 8th hour of this morning, indicated that they will, on the small specific questions, small specific arrival at the small specific reception standard greeting, provisionally consent to the small specific non-exclusive arrangement on the small specific condition of my own small specific consent to the arrangement's small specific structural transparency protocol. He said, the small specific structural transparency protocol, she said, is, by the small specific founding agreement framework of the existing arrangement, a small specific full disclosure protocol that requires all small specific affected parties to be fully informed of all small specific operational and personal dimensions of the arrangement's small specific structural development. The protocol is, by my own honest internal assessment, operationally acceptable. He said, the Imperial Cultivation Engagement's small specific structural mechanics on the non-exclusive arrangement with the small specific structural transparency protocol, she said, will, on the four parties' small specific structural integration, produce, by my honest internal projection, the Empire's small specific, most operationally significant cultivator political partnership across the past 3 centuries. He held her eyes. He said, I accept the small specific offer. She said, the small specific offer is, by the precise small specific protocol of the reception greeting, formally accepted. She extended her hand across the line. He took it. The handshake held for the small specific protocol prescribed duration of 3 breaths. She withdrew. She said, the engagement's small specific structural integration. He said, will begin, by my own honest preference, at the small specific reception's standard small specific close. The integration's small specific pacing will, by the precise small specific quality of the small specific structural transparency protocol's standard pattern, develop on whatever pace the small specific quality of our continued interaction produces. She said, understood. She moved down the reception line. Kade continued the reception's small specific greetings for the remaining 1 hour and 40 minutes of the reception's small specific protocol. The remaining greetings were, by every external measure, small specific polite. The remaining greetings were, by every external measure, also unremarkable in their small specific reception protocol content. The reception concluded at the 12th hour. Kade departed the Imperial Arena's small specific reception hall by the small specific carriage of the Imperial Palace's delegation, which Princess Rin had, by the small specific reception's small specific operational close, arranged. The carriage delivered him to the Imperial Palace. The small specific structural integration of the 4-party arrangement began at the small specific reception's standard small specific close. The integration's small specific personal pacing was, by every honest measure of the 4 small specific parties' continued interaction across the next several weeks, the precise small specific pace that the small specific quality of the continued interaction produced. Epilogue, the 20 years. The 4-party arrangement, by the end of the first 3 years after the tournament, produced, by every honest external measure of the Empire's small specific cultivation political history, the Empire's most operationally significant cultivator political partnership across the past 3 centuries. The partnership's small specific operational outputs across the 3 years included Vorin Kade's small specific advancement from mid-bronze tier to mid-silver tier, achieved through the Academy's small specific direct disciple program under Sarah Lin's small specific personal mentorship. The Yin Rava goods and trade's small specific expansion from the Imperial City's smallest gambling syndicate to the Empire's third-largest small specific commercial holding network, through the small specific operational integration of the Imperial Palace's small specific commercial license access and the Academy's small specific institutional purchasing network. The Imperial Cultivation Academy's small specific institutional reputation effect, which, by Sarah Lin's small specific direct disciples' small specific public profile, produced an approximately 40-fold increase in the Academy's small specific annual recruitment application volume. The Imperial Palace's small specific institutional consolidation of the Empire's small specific cultivation political network through Princess Rin Liang's small specific operational use of the four-party arrangement's small specific reputational capacity to negotiate small specific cultivation political alignments across the Empire's 16 senior cultivation houses. By the end of the first 5 years, Vorin Kade was, by every external measure of the Empire's small specific cultivation registry, at high silver tier. He was, by the Empire's small specific cultivation political reputation network, the Empire's small specific, most operationally significant cultivator. By the end of year 10, he was at low gold tier. He was the Empire's most operationally significant cultivator by a margin that the Imperial Registry had no small specific comparable historical record for. By the end of year 15, he was at high gold tier. He was, by the Imperial Palace's small specific cultivation political assessment, the Empire's small specific most significant cultivator since the Empire's founding emperor. By the end of year 20, he was at the precise small specific tier that the Empire's small specific cultivation registry had, across the Empire's 300-year history, recorded only once before, in the founding emperor's small specific personal cultivation record. The tier was platinum. Vorin Kade was, at 39 years of small specific biological age, the Empire's most operationally significant cultivator across 3 centuries. The four-party arrangement, across the same 20 years, had, by every honest internal accounting, also produced what the 4 small specific parties had, by the small specific structural transparency protocol's standard pattern, become a small specific extended household of 4 people whose small specific personal and operational lives had, across the precise small specific quality of 20 years of continued interaction, become, by every honest measure, the small specific structural foundation of each of their lives. The household had, by year 5, also produced 4 small specific children. Princess Rin Liang's son in year 3, named Vorin Hung, after the Empire's small specific founding emperor. Yin Rava's daughter in year 5, named Vorin Mei, after the small specific historical Vorin clan matriarch. Sarah Lin's daughter in year 7, named Vorin Tess, after a small specific scholar of the Empire's small specific founding period. Yin Rava's son in year 9, named Vorin Drev, after no one in particular. The 4 small specific children were, by year 20, the Empire's small specific, most operationally protected young cultivators. The Empire, across the same 20 years, had been, by every honest external measure, the small specific most peaceful period the Empire had documented across its 300-year history. The peace was, by every honest reading of the Empire's small specific political pattern, a small specific direct consequence of the 4-party arrangement's small specific structural consolidation of the Empire's small specific cultivation political network. The small specific quietness of the Vorin Kade arena. the small specific phrase that the imperial city's small specific newspapers had coined on the morning after the tournament's final, had, by year 20, become the small specific phrase by which the empire's small specific cultivation political historians referred to the small specific period of Vorin Kade's small specific operational dominance. The historian's small specific scholarly consensus, by year 20, was that the small specific quietness was, by the empire's small specific cultivation political history, the small specific period of the empire's small specific, most operationally productive small specific structural development. The historians did not, in their small specific scholarly consensus, identify the small specific structural mechanism that had, at the precise small specific moment of the tournament's first round, produced the small specific quietness. The mechanism was, by every honest external measure, never identified. The mechanism was, by the precise small specific quality of Kade's small specific operational discretion across the 20 years, never disclosed. The mechanism remained, by the precise small specific quality of the four-party arrangement's small specific operational protocol, known to four people in the empire. The four people, by year 20, were content with the small specific arrangement. The work continued. End.